Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto becomes obsessed with Rias part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Well shit, it looks like it worked, spoke a grinning teen as he gazed out into the city below. The teen looked to be at least 17, stood at a solid 6 foot tall, and was rippling with compact muscles built for speed and maneuverability. He wore a form-fitting short-sleeved black shirt that was tucked into a pair of black shinobi pants that were taped at the ankles. Over top the shirt he wore a sleeveless crimson-red trench coat that bore a rust-orange spiral which had the kanji for sage at the center of it. On his feet he wore a pair of black ninja sandals that looked like they had seen better days. A pair of shining bright blue eyes glowed even in the darkness of this night, reflecting what little moonlight was able to make it through the clouds. His face was devoid of any fat or blemish, leaving a refined and handsome face befitting someone of royalty. In contrast, his long dark crimson hair fell messily in spikes around his shoulders, a black cloth headband with a metal plate being the only thing keeping his long hair out of his face. Even still, the long locks covered parts of the metal, barely showing a symbol that looked like a leaf. This teen was Naruto Uzumaki, hero of the Forest Shinobi World War, bearer of the Uzumaki bloodline, and former Jinchuriki to the Kyuubi no Kitsune. After Naruto had defeated Pain/Nagato, and the man had brought back everyone he had killed, Naruto had realized how weak he really was. He had had to rely on the Kyuubi's yokai as well as Sage Mode to pull him out of that near-death experience. Of course, those things made him a force to be reckoned with, but his predecessors had needed no such things. Jiraiya was an incredibly strong nin even without the use of Sage Mode. The Shodaime, who was hailed as the Kami no Shinobi, had made a name for himself using only his skills as a tactician and his prowess with his Mokuton. His father had managed to single-handedly turn the tide of the Third Shinobi War using his two signature jutsu. They were all able to stand on their own feet without the use of outside help. They had all made a name for themselves and carved out a part in the history books as legends using their own two hands, their minds, and their sheer force of will. After his little epiphany, he had decided to seclude himself in Mount Myaboku, and while there had thrown himself into every possible area of shinobi life he could, abusing the hell out of the Kage Bunshin Jutsu and his own insane stamina. Within the span of a month he managed to learn all the basics he had been denied at the academy due to his status as a Jinchuriki. In another month he had begun to master the art that he was made for, ninjutsu. With his almost bijou level reserves he could toss out S-rank jutsu left and right like Tsunade could toss away money gambling. Not even Jiraiya or the Sandaime could claim such a thing. While his clones worked on that, he had thrown himself into actually learning a taijutsu style. His brawling style was great for unpredictability, but that was about all it could do for him. With that in mind though, he was able to come up with his own style, which he called the Otokumono no Shikata, way of the Joker. The style took advantage of his natural unpredictability and ability to come up with ingenious plans on the fly. Its first stage was him dodging and weaving to learn his opponent's style and make a way to counter it with his own speed and ingenuity. The next stage utilized his massive reserves to pin his enemies down with massive amounts of ninjutsu. The final stage utilized the speed and jutsu usage the previous two used, as well as his ability to abuse the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, making him a true army of one. The next month was spent developing any support strengths he could use in case of emergencies. After he found out from the toads that his mother had been as deadly with a blade as any of the Kiri no Shinobigatana Shishinin Shu, 7 swordsmen of the mist, he had instantly decided to follow in her footsteps. It seemed that his mother's own prowess had been passed down, as he had taken to the art like a fish to water, learning several basic kenjutsu styles within a week. He decided to follow his mother's own style and make a kenjutsu form that was unique to him. Following the same principles as his taijutsu style, the Esamono no Shikita, way of the trickster, was born. Speaking of his mother, he had met what had remained of her soul inside the seal after an encounter with the Kyuubi. When she told him about what being an Uzumaki meant, he had broken down and vowed that he would make his clan proud and revive the fear and awe that their name had once brought. Doing so had inadvertently unlocked his Uzumaki heritage, turning his once bright blonde hair into the signature crimson locks of the Uzumaki, though they were much darker and vibrant than most Uzumaki. He however kept his striking blue eyes, which his mother told him fit him more. Before she left, she informed him that both she and his father had left several scrolls containing jutsus, letters, and other things in a sealing tattoo on his right shoulder. What he found inside said seal left him shocked. One scroll contained his mother's personal okatana, as well as a scroll detailing the basics of her style named Beneheim, Crimson Princess. His father had left him a scroll of how to perform the jutsu that had given him his moniker, the famed Hiraition no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique. Both had left letters telling him how much they loved him and regretted what they had to do, his father being especially apologetic, knowing that it was his idea to seal the Kyuubi into his son. Both had also left him a massive scroll that contained several smaller scrolls that contained several jutsu of every element, even having some Jikuken, time-space, techniques and Fuinjutsu, sealing techniques, notes. Within the month he had mastered his mother's Kenjutsu style and mixed it into his own, mastered the Hiraishin to the point of no longer needing the markers, become a seals master easily on par with the legendary Mito Uzumaki, and learned enough jutsu to put both Kakashi and the Sandame's own ninjutsu knowledge to shame. Within those months he had risen from his base level of Chunin to the level of such legends as Hanzo the Salamander and Pain/Nagato, who were said to be able to fight on the level of the Ichibi, Nibi, and Sanbai. With the use of Sage Mode and Okubi he could easily be on the level of the Rokubi or Nanabai. It was at the ending of this month that Tsunade had told him of the impending Kage summit in Tetsu no Kuni, Land of Iron, that would determine how the hidden villages would handle the threat of Akatsuki. She had specifically told him because she wanted him to accompany her as a bodyguard, both because she knew the progress of his current training, and having the man who had done the impossible and defeated Pain as her bodyguard would give her a slight edge in the debate. Naruto had at first denied her because he wanted to continue to get stronger and progress, but she had bribed him by offering him the position of ANBU for not just the mission but as an actual position when he returned to the village. Knowing that by accepting to join ANBU he would automatically gain a promotion to Jounin as well, he had flashed into her office with a grin and accepted. On the way to the summit they had bumped into the current Mizukage, Mei Torimi. When she saw the masked ANBU member, the female Kage had inquired why Tsunade only had the one masked ANBU as her bodyguard. Naruto was playing the silent part, not wanting to reveal who he was just yet, and so Tsunade had merely grinned and told the redhead that he was more than capable of protecting her. Despite the secrecy, the two groups had decided to travel together the rest of the way. The small group had then encountered Gaara with his brother and sister acting as his guards. They too were curious about the masked individual, but Gaara had taken a look at the man and actually smiled, which shocked everyone present. The individual had merely nodded at Gaara, which shocked Mei and her group, as that was more than she had gotten the whole time they had been traveling together. Upon reaching Tetsu and being led to the meeting place, they were met by the other Kages as well as Mifune, the leader of Tetsu and its samurai forces. He had explained that no weapons were to be allowed in the meeting room and any use of chakra, however small, was not permitted. He had then told Tsunade that her bodyguard would have to unmask himself and take off the robe he was wearing to show that he was not hiding anything. In a flourish, the masked individual did just that, revealing the form of a grinning Naruto, shocking all who knew of him. Mei of course realized why Tsunade had only brought him along. If the man could defeat the feared Pain who had toppled Hanzo, then he was more than capable of fighting any of those present if need be. What shocked her and Gaara was the red hair. Many had thought that the savior of Konoha and defeater of Pain had been a blonde. Naruto had said that he unlocked his Uzumaki bloodline, causing the Reikage and Tsuchikage to shift uneasily. They had known that he was an Uzumaki but thought that his father's genes had suppressed his Uzumaki genes, but to hear that the bloodline that had brought fame and power to the village of Yuzu and had needed the joint forces of 3 of the great villages to take down was back was not comforting. The fact said bloodline was now in the hands of the man who had brought down Pain, had trained under the famed Gamma Sennin Jiraiya and Sharingan no Kakashi, and was the son of their most feared and hated enemy, the Kiroi Senko, made matters even worse. The meeting went off as expected, with the Kages bickering like children. Mei and Gaara had both tried to have some sort of input but were instantly shot down by the Reikage and the old Tsuchikage Anoki. Tsunade had merely sat back and let them bicker amongst themselves with her hands steepled in front of her face and her eyes closed. After a rather loud comment from Mei and his almost breaking the table, the room was overcome with an awkward and tense silence. Taking advantage of the situation, Tsunade had asked, "Are you all done fighting like little children?" Infuriating A and the Tsuchikage. Before they could retaliate, Tsunade launched into talking about her plan of having all the villages, large and minor, joining forces to take down the threat of Akatsuki. Before they could rebuttal, they were yet again interrupted but by the forms of Tobi and Sasuke Uchiha appearing this time. Tobi had then begun to tell them of his Eye of the Moon plan, ranting and raving like the lunatic he was. Before he could finish, though, a sandal met his face, rocketing him out of the room. Before Sasuke could move, he found himself on his back with the same sandal standing on his windpipe, stopping him from breathing. The Kages looked up in awe to see Naruto bowing and apologizing for his rudeness, stating that he couldn't stand it when the bad guy monologued. An infuriated Tobi stormed back into the room only to have a fist smash into his masked face, sending him through the wall yet again. Tobi questioned how the blonde was hurting him when the power of his Sharingan should make him intangible. Naruto appeared behind him, his okatana held at the Uchiha's throat. All who saw it were shocked. When Naruto had disappeared, a very familiar trail of light followed him. It wasn't his father's yellow flash. No, it was his own crimson flash. It seemed Konoha once more had the feared Hiraishin no Jutsu in its forces. Tobi and Sasuke had retreated, and after seeing Naruto manhandle the two most powerful members of Akatsuki, the other Kages as well as Mifune had agreed to Tsunade's plan. Both Kumo and Iwa had suffered massive losses due to Minato. They did not want to be on the receiving end of his feared jutsu powered by a bijou. In the end, despite the edge the joint shinobi forces seemed to have thanks to Naruto, the Uzumaki had been captured, shocking everyone. However, when they saw the signature fox-like grin on his face as he was taken away, they couldn't help but laugh and shake their heads at the very Naruto-esque action. Instead of the Akatsuki sealing jutsu absorbing the Kyuubi's soul and power, it had instead absorbed Naruto himself, leaving a very happy Kitsune the freedom to use his body and obliterate most of the Zetsu forces with a combined Bijudama and Hiraishin. The allied shinobi forces instantly fought back with a renewed vigor. Despite Tobi using the impure resurrection jutsu to revive several famous legends as well as the previous Jinchuriki, they were easily handled by the current legends like Kakashi, the Kages, Sasuke, and the now free Kyuubi. Naruto was busy himself separating the incomplete Jubi that resided within the Geto-Mizu statue. Using his vast knowledge of seals, he succeeded and was able to free the sealed bijou from their prison. The appearance of the other 9 bijou signaled the end for Tobi and his plan. He had brought Madara back, but even the Uchiha elder knew that he could not fight against the combined might of the 9 bijou, the 5 Kages, and the true heir of the Rikudo Sennin. Tobi, or Obito as he was later found out to be, and Madara were easily destroyed. Their existence, as well as a chunk of Hai no Kuni, was wiped off the map by Naruto and the Kyuubi's combined bijou, Raisin Shuriken no Jutsu. Soon after, the allied forces destroyed the remainder of Zetsu forces, and Kabuto/Orochimaru met a fate similar to Madara and Obito at the hands of Naruto and Sasuke. Soon after, an era of true peace came to the elemental nations. Tsunade stepped down and shocking everyone named Kakashi as the Rokudame Hokage. She of course stated that he was not her first choice, but Naruto had turned down the position. Naruto had explained that he was happy to have fulfilled the wish of his parents and godfather, but peace just was not for him. Even after becoming a full-fledged sage and becoming in tune with nature itself, absorbing the Kyuubi's powers and freeing said bijou, he had gained a lust for battle. He had grown so used to living his life on the edge of a knife that doing otherwise seemed so foreign to him. And so with the combined efforts of the bijou, Senjutsu, and his own mastery of Fuinjutsu, Naruto left his world behind for a new adventure. All of this led up to his current position, standing on a rooftop at night and gazing out into the city that lay before him. It saddened him a little that this world had destroyed so much of nature, but still he managed to find a park not too far away, and using his connection to nature learned what he could of the world. In the span of 10 minutes he had learned that he was currently in Japan. Luckily they spoke a language similar to his own, and learned of the existence of devils, angels, and the true God. He wasn't too shocked by this, as he had housed a massive construct of chakra that was a force of nature itself for 17 years of his life. Which brought him to the question of what he was now. Before he could ponder on the question anymore, his stomach announced its presence with a loud growl, causing the Uzumaki to sweat drop. Wonder if this place has any ramen. And off Naruto went into this new world to do what Naruto did best, be himself. What kind of ripples would Naruto make in this new world? Join him to find out. Naruto had spent his first few days in the new world getting accustomed to the various new things like cars, cell phones, and all the things that came with this modern world. Learning about them and actually physically interacting with them in person were two totally different things. Nonetheless, he had taken it all in stride, and through the use of Henge and Kage Bunshin had managed to build himself quite the stash of money, and using said currency he had purchased himself a good-sized home where he planted dozens of plants in and around the property. He may have gotten used to this new world and all, but he was still born a Konoha shinobi and a sage, and as such he needed to be surrounded by nature to feel at home. Through his first few weeks in the new world he had encountered his fair share of devils and angels that wandered the city and called it home. Being a sage and an Uzumaki had gifted him with a rather decent sensory ability. Nowhere on the level that Sasuke's teammate Karen, who he suspected was an Uzumaki, was, but still it allowed him to sense people in his vicinity, and using said ability he could feel the different beings around him. He was easily able to sense the devils and angels as their energy compared to normal humans, and such was vastly different, and so was made easier to pick out of the crowds of the city. What intrigued him were the interactions between the two factions. He wasn't surprised by the outright hate the majority of the two races had for each other, but rather the tensing one did when encountering someone from the other faction, as if there was a loose ceasefire of some sort barely being held together. He became even more curious when he noticed not only a subset of angels whose energy seemed closer to a devil's than an angel's, but also a vast amount of other creatures. He questioned what had happened in this world's history to not only trigger this evolution, but also the amount of presence the other factions had. His own home world had of course had the bijou and even a few demons here and there, but due to humans evolving to use chakra, the demon population was so small that they seemed more fairy tale than anything. Though looking at the general human populace, he could hazard a guess that due to humans seemingly occupying a lower spot on the food chain than they had in his world, the need for higher tier creatures had allowed for the larger number of devils, angels, and other such creatures to coexist. Being Naruto, though, meant that he still had questions that needed concrete answers. He highly doubted that any devil or angel would willingly share their knowledge with him due to the secrecy they seemed to have regarding humans. He wasn't exactly altogether human himself, but he wasn't a devil or angel either, so he would have no luck with that. Eventually, he decided to get his answers the shinobi way. He waited patiently and soon enough was able to catch a devil trying to attack and presumably eat a human. The devil was easily handled and restrained using various seals that Naruto was well versed in using, allowing the human to escape while screaming in terror. Unfortunately, the arrogant thing refused to cooperate, and Naruto wasn't exactly a Biki or Anko when it came to interrogation, being a combat-oriented nin. Luckily, a Biki had taught him a jutsu for just such situations. It was a bastardized version of the Yamanaka clan's mind jutsu, but it still worked effectively at getting what you wanted to know out of someone's mind. The chances of them surviving the jutsu without their mind melting into mush, however, weren't so high. Knowing the devil had no qualms eating humans made Naruto's decision to use the jutsu all the easier. Through it, he was able to learn about the dark angels who had fallen, and even learned about the great war that was waged between the three factions, culminating in the tense ceasefire that was still currently in effect. He also gained a rather interesting insight as to why there were so many devils running around. It seemed that after the war the three factions had lost many of their numbers, and so the devils had come up with the evil peace system. The system worked through devil-powered chess pieces that would reincarnate humans and other creatures into devils who would then pledge their loyalty to a king, and, along with others that the king had reincarnated, would fall under what was called a peerage. He was curious to know if the angels and fallen angels had similar systems to bring up their numbers. Naruto just shook his head at the information, though. It seemed no matter what, war was a constant, in every walk of life and every world. He could only sigh at his own jaded outlook. He couldn't be blamed for it, though. No matter what, he would always disagree with Obito and Madara's train of thinking, but he could definitely see why they had come to be how they were, and why they had sought to complete the Moon of the Eye plan. Living the life of a Jinchuriki meant that he had been indoctrinated into the dark, seedy underbelly of the human species at birth, something that followed him well into his teens and even now still had a hold on him. It was partially because of his own jaded outlook that he had left his home world in the first place. He was indeed happy that a true sense of peace had come to his home, but that dark part of him nagged him every time he saw the smiling faces of some. He had given his blood, sweat, tears, and innocence to those people. To the same people who were the cause of his horrid childhood. The same people who, even after he had saved them 2 times at the risk of his own life, would have sold him out to Akatsuki if it meant saving their own skin. Sure, they hailed him as their hero now, but that voice in the back of his head always served to remind him that if he had failed he would have been crucified, blamed as the one responsible for the downfall of the world. Not wishing to dwell on such unpleasant thoughts, Naruto burned the corpse of the now long dead devil with a minor katan jutsu and decided to retire to his home. As he left the alley that he had cornered the demon in, he felt 3 sets of eyes watching him. One a devil, another an angel, and the last one was of the fallen angels. The last 2 radiated power in such vast amounts that even when they tried to suppress it, it was easily felt, though fallen angel dwarfed anything the angel could put out. The devil, though was young, yet still seemed to be relatively strong. Wanting to have fun, he looked up at where he knew they were and waved with a big stupid grin on his face. "Hi there." Naruto chuckled on the inside as he felt all 3 of them narrow their eyes in surprise at the action. "You know it's not polite to stalk people. Pretty sure that's illegal actually." And before they could react, Naruto was gone in a crimson flash, the last thing they saw being a foxy grin. "I didn't sense anything from him at all," echoed the thoughts of the 3 hidden figures. One was a well-endowed and beautiful crimson-haired teenage girl who wore what looked to be a school uniform of some sort. The other, not far from her, was a well-dressed man with blonde bangs with the rest of his short, messy hair colored black. The last was a handsome-looking blonde-haired man garbed in a simple white robe with gold trimmings. A few weeks later we find Naruto enjoying the peace of the neighborhood park. He had begun coming to the park regularly at night as, other than his own home, it was the only place that held enough nature for him to meditate properly. However, today his normal meditation was interrupted by the appearance of 3 very unique signatures. One was from the night that he had encountered that stray devil, and the other 2 were a fallen angel and a human with a rather odd power buried in him. None of them were anywhere near strong enough to be considered a workout, so he would just let things play out on their own. Naruto realized though that he wouldn't be able to return to meditating as the fallen angel released their power into the air. It wasn't anywhere close to those he was used to, but still it was enough to irritate him. With a sigh, he ran his hand through his long crimson locks and walked to see what all the commotion was about. Naruto watched in interest as the fallen attempted to skewer the human with her tainted light powers. What piqued his interest though was that the devil was doing what he was doing and just watching it all happen. He raised an eyebrow as the fallen finally succeeded in making a human shish kebab, and at that moment the devil decided to intervene on the human's behalf. The human dying wasn't that shocking to him, having seen more than his fair share of death and even having been responsible for some of it, but what really caught his eye was the devil. She was, to say the least, a bombshell. The girl was his age, maybe a few years older, and already had curves bordering on a freaking Tsunade level. Guess being a devil has some perks, Naruto thought as he examined the female devil. What really caught his eye though was her vibrant red hair. He guessed it had something to do with his father or his Uzumaki heritage, but he had always found girls with red hair more attractive. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he heard the two females trade words, the devil citing something about the fallen being in her territory. He then saw the fallen angel launch an attack at the red-haired beauty in a bout of anger over something that was said. Naruto shrugged, knowing his fellow redhead could more than handle herself, but some part of him still enjoyed playing the hero, and with a crimson flash Naruto was gone. 1 second Rias was prepared to defend herself and show the fallen angel why you don't mess with the Gremory family, and the next the red-haired guy from a few weeks ago was in front of her stopping the light spear with his index finger, his other hand in his pants pocket. Now I'm not really against violence, but I am against unnecessary violence, especially when it involves such a beautiful girl, and with a simple move of his hand the light spear was thrust into the ground where it disintegrated. He can't be a devil if he can touch a light spear and not feel any pain from it, so that must mean he's either an angel or another fallen? But why would he save me? I'm positive he knows what I am, so why? Questioned the still kneeling Rias. Her attention was then drawn to the battle at hand when the fallen angel huffed and summoned another light spear and charged at her fellow redhead. Showing no signs of even trying, Naruto moved his body slightly to the left and lifted up his foot where it would be level with the purple-haired fallen's face. A mere second later, and the tainted angel was making out with the bottom of Naruto's sandals. He had literally put no power into it, merely reinforcing his stance in a way that made it equivalent to the dark angel slamming into a concrete wall. With another sigh and his hands still in his pockets, he spun and kicked the fallen with enough force to send her flying through several trees, though that was nothing more than a love tap to him. Tsunade probably could have done the same with naught but a flick of her finger. He then turned to the kneeling redhead behind him. I know you could have handled her yourself, but I kinda got a little bored just watching. Sorry for interrupting. I'll be off now, and Naruto turned and began to walk away. I'm sorry, but who are you? The still curious Rias asked. If he was human, then she could have him join her peerage, and if he was this strong as a human, then he could possibly become near ultimate class and become a valuable asset to her peerage. Naruto turned his head and smiled his signature foxy grin. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, at your service, milady. Rias blushed at both the formal greeting and the grin that just did something to her before nodding her head in return. Rias Gremory. Nice to meet you, Rias Gremory, but as much as I would like to stay and get to know a beauty like yourself, I really must get going. Naruto, his best flirting voice. Before Rias could even say anything, Naruto was gone in a flash of red. So who was Foxy-kun Bucho? Asked a curious buxom bluish black-haired teen who appeared from a magic circle just behind Rias. Someone who could be very useful to have in my peerage, Akino, answered a still-thinking Rias. This Naruto person was powerful, much more powerful than he let on. It scared her to think that he may well be on the level of ultimate class already. For that brief second where he flashed away, she had been able to catch a glimpse of his power, and what she saw was unbelievable. Akino then pointed at the human Rias had resurrected as one of her pawns. What about Issei Senbucho? Oh, him? Take him back to his home. He'll be fine, and we'll have Kiba bring him to us tomorrow during school, Rias replied, waving her hand nonchalantly. She was interested in the sacred gear Issei had, but Naruto had caught her attention more than the pervert. This is odd to say the least, a confused but still calm Naruto spoke aloud to himself. Whenever he used the Hiraishin, he would sense two titanic energies for the briefest of moments. While he was in the in-between, he had used the jutsu many times in his world, and all he could see when using it was an almost endless void of inky blackness. The jutsu was a Jikuken, time-space, jutsu, and worked by using the user's chakra to literally create a hole in the universe. Once outside of the mortal realm, you would then create another hole that would lead you to wherever it was that you were aiming to go. Due to the difference in how time flowed in this void realm, the technique seemed to be an almost instantaneous teleportation. The markers his father used were a focal point for his chakra, so that way he wouldn't get lost in the jumps between the realms and end up inside a volcano on the other side of the world. However, Naruto had been able to use the special chakra that was the Uzumaki bloodline to eliminate the need for a marker. He still needed a focal point, yes, but with as dense as Uzumaki chakra was, he could do much the same as his mother had and turn it into physical chains. Using the chakra chains, he would make a sort of handrail to the place he wanted to be and simply follow the chakra chain to its end. However, his curiosity had been piqued when he saw that the void realm he was using to do the jumps housed two massive energies. Using his mastery of the jutsu, he made the first hole into the void realm, and then never made the second hole, leaving him inside the void. This worlds in between was what had made him blink in curiosity. It reminded him of what Jiraiya had described to him that one time on their training trip, that one of his spies, hookers, had slipped him something called LSD. There were various odd and brightly colored orbs floating about, and there was a sense of endlessness to it. On top of that, the whole place was a bleeding mixture of iridescent colors that would have disoriented many. He sensed that other than him there were the two other massive sources of energy, and both came rather close to his own power level, maybe even having more energy than he himself did. Knowing this, a grin of excitement spread across his face. To catch either of the two beings' attention, he flared his chakra, making the ground on which he stood crack. With his grin still on his face, he felt the two massive sources of energy begin to quickly move towards him. It didn't take long for him to see one of the sources of energy, as it was a massive red dragon. He quirked his eyebrow as he saw that the other energy source was what appeared to a preteen dressed in a gothic lowly costume of some sort. The massive dragon grumbled in questioning, "What are you doing here, human?" "Well, you see, I've been looking for someone strong enough to spar with, and I happened to feel your power, so I thought, why the hell not, and here we are," spoke the cheeky redhead. "You have not yet been disintegrated by the gap." "Interesting," Red mumbled in thought. Great Red narrowed his eyes, however, when he felt just how much power this human was letting out. The boy didn't look to be trying, which meant the vast amount of energy coming from him was excess energy. That alone was impressive, as the excess alone was equal to what most higher-tier devils had in their whole bodies. "You are no mere human, are you? I cannot smell the scent of devil or angel from you at all. What are you? No human can possibly be this strong." Naruto smirked as he got into the beginning stance for his Otokomono no Shikata, way of the Joker. By relaxing all the muscles in his body, he prepared himself for anything his opponent threw at him, while not telegraphing his own moves. "Nothing special. Just a wandering sage is all," Naruto grinned. "A sage? I've never encountered a sage such as yourself, but you intrigue me. Fine, we will spar." Great Red then released a massive roar to signify that he was battle-ready. Ophice was shocked as she could see that Red was going to actually take the teen seriously. What interested her even more was that she didn't doubt that this sage could very well take on Red. If he could win was an entirely different matter. Only the combined power of the four Satans or the four Seraphs was enough for herself or Great Red to do more than just swat them aside, and even then it required only a portion of their true power. This being, however, was a mystery. He looked and seemed human for the most part, but he radiated a power that easily matched her own and Great Red's. "Let's see just how strong you really are, Mr. Sage. Luckily, we're in an endless void and don't have to worry about getting others involved or property damage, which means I can really let loose," Naruto thought as he let his hold on his chakra go. He normally had to hold down a lot of his power just so that he wouldn't poison or kill people with the amount of nature chakra and pure chakra that leaked out of him. "Guess I'll start us off then. Futon, Otama Raisin Shuriken. Wind style, big ball spiraling shuriken," and with nary a thought Naruto's now signature move formed in his right hand, dwarfing Naruto himself. With a toss, the massive shuriken made of wind was sent on a direct path towards Great Red, destroying the ground underneath it as it sped towards its target. With barely any effort being shown on his face, Red was able to bat the massive wind shuriken aside as if it were just an insignificant fly. However, much to his surprise, he saw that the scales on the back of his paw were heavily damaged, and he was even bleeding, if slightly. Red was given no respite from Naruto, who called out, "Katon, Carrier Enden, Fire Style, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet." And with a breath, Naruto unleashed a massive stream of flames almost the size of one Great Red's limbs. Due to his own size and the size of the attack, Great Red could do naught but take the attack head-on. With a grimace, Red's torso was bathed in the massive stream of burning flames. Naruto stopped fueling the attack with chakra, and soon the scorching flames ceased and revealed that several sections of Red's torso had been burned black due to the high intensity of the flames' heat. Great Red wasn't known as the true dragon for nothing though, and despite his wounds he unleashed a stream of his own flames. They bathed the spot where Naruto was, but the Uzumaki had taken advantage of their difference in size and sped up Red's massive limbs and leapt into the air above Great Red long before the flames could reach him. Futon, Kami Oroshir no Jutsu, godly wine from the mountain, Naruto called, and Great Red was buffeted by winds with such force that they would have surely slammed a lesser being into the ground and kept them pinned there, breaking bones at the same time. Even still, Red was struggling to move due to the pressure the winds created. As Naruto's impromptu flight came to an end, he summoned a normal Rasengan in both hands and slammed them both into the top of Great Red's scaled skull, sending him sprawling onto the floor, kicking up a storm of dust. When the dust cleared, a grinning Naruto and panting Great Red were revealed. With a massive roar and flap of its wings, the rest of the remaining dust was cleared out. "I can see that my size will do nothing but hinder me in this battle," grunted out the battered Red. Naruto raised an eyebrow when his vision began to distort, and the oddly colored orbs that flitted around became much brighter. Being a sage and the container for a kitsune, though, meant that he knew exactly what was happening. Naruto merely blinked once and the world around him faded back to normal. He was shocked, though, when the form of Great Red was revealed again, but this time in a much smaller size. Where Naruto was barely the size of one of Great Red's claws, he was now only a few inches shy of Great Red's size, putting the true dragon at around 6 foot and some inches. "Didn't know you could use illusions, but you're gonna have to do a lot better than that to fool me with an illusion," Naruto spoke as he once more took the beginning stance for his taijutsu style. "I figured as much, as I can smell kitsune on you, and they are the only creatures whose illusions best my own. Though that illusion was only meant to distract you so I could shrink myself to a more suitable size," revealed the now much smaller Great Red. With a nod to other, the two were off in burst of speed only seen when fist met paw. Naruto was shocked to find that Red was actually very skilled in terms of hand-to-hand combat. He had figured that a dragon of his size would just use said size to his advantage and not even worry about knowing any actual style. What threw him for a loop was how Red incorporated the use of his tail and wings into it. He used his wings as distractions or shields and his tail as an extra limb to hit with. Naruto, though, had made his style to be able to fit any situation, and sparring with a nine-tailed kitsune helped to prepare him for just such styles. The two separated, Red spewing another stream of flames and Naruto calling out, "Suiton, Daibakufu no Jutsu, Great Waterfall." When the two attacks met, a huge amount of steam clouded the area, reducing the visibility of most greatly. But Naruto was a shinobi sage and Red was a dragon, so neither needed their vision to do battle. Great Red used the reduced visibility to his advantage and cast an illusion over the redhead. Naruto knew almost instantly that he was in an illusion and dispelled it, but the short time it took him to dispel the illusion was all Great Red needed to slam his scaled paw into the side of Naruto's face. Naruto was sent flying out of the misty area and skidding across the floor, red hot on his tail. As Naruto bounced off the ground, Red used his tail and wrapped it around Naruto's ankle and sent him into air at breakneck speeds, a stream of dark red flames following. The flames burned so hot that the air began to steam up around the stream. A few seconds later, the smoking form of the Uzumaki was seen plummeting to the ground, where it crashed, cratering it due to the velocity it had gained from its fall. Even still, Red wasn't keen on letting Naruto have any sort of breathing room. Red took to the air before he once more let loose a stream of flames into the crater where Naruto had landed. The blazing heat from the flames was so hot that the ground they impacted upon began to melt into molten lava, filling the crater with the burning rock. Before Red could even fully stop the flames, he felt a fist smash into his scaled abdomen, causing him to bend over in pain and loss of breath. Naruto didn't end it there, though, and grabbed the dragon's skull and slammed it into his knee, though he paid for that as Red's scales tore into his skin and tore off a good chunk of it. Despite this, Naruto spun and heel kicked the true dragon in the snout, sending the dragon speeding towards the unforgiving earth. A massive cloud of dust and shrapnel was sent into the air as Red's body impacted with the earth. Naruto then flashed to Red's fallen form, Rasengan in hand, only to have the true dragon's tail puncture straight through his abdomen, causing him to stumble and giving Red the opening he needed. Red used his tail to slam Naruto into the ground repeatedly, using the respite to get himself into a standing position and regain some breath. Great Red then savagely tore through Naruto's chest with his clawed hands, the sage coughing up the blood from his now punctured lung. With a pained groan, Naruto managed to form the hand seals for his next technique, Futon, Kaze no Yaiba, Wind Release, Blade of Wind. With the formed wind blade in his hand, Naruto returned the favor to Red and stabbed the dragon through the abdomen. Red grunted in pain as the sharpened blade of wind tore through the scales on his abdomen in an attempt to skewer him. Before the technique could fully penetrate him, Red tossed Naruto away, violently tearing his claws and tail from the red-headed sage. Naruto's body tumbled across the ground before finally stopping with Naruto sprawled out on his back. Much to both Red and Ofa's surprise, they heard Naruto begin to chuckle before slowly pulling himself to his feet, a grin plastered on his face. His clothes and cloak were torn in several places with stains of blood covering his shirt and several large patches. But instead of the gaping wounds they expected to see, they say only the smooth and tan skin that lay underneath the shirt. "How are you still not wounded? I've stabbed you twice now with my claws and once clean through with my tail," shouted an irritated Great Red. Even Ophis would have been severely wounded at this point, yet this supposed sage remained unscathed. Naruto only chuckled. "My family was known for its abnormal longevity and healing. Mine was amplified thanks to a friend of mine, and it only got stronger as I got older." "Of course you have a healing factor. Just great. As much as I am loath to admit it, I'm on my last legs here. One last go?" questioned the grinning Great Red. He wouldn't openly admit it, but he enjoyed battling just as much as any dragon. It was in their very DNA to want to fight and show who was dominant, to show who stood at the top of the food chain. His battles with Ophis were more like spats, and neither really wanted to fight, even if neither would admit to it. But this sage had pushed him to fight like he had when he had been but an arrogant hatchling out to prove his worth, and it had been many a century since those days. Unfortunately, due to how long ago those days were, he had grown rather rusty. Yes, he still had enough energy left over to kickstart the apocalypse, but his body had grown and used to using such massive amounts of energy for such long periods, and he was beginning to feel it. If he tried to use any more energy than what his body would allow, it may actually start physically hurting him. On the sidelines, a gaping Ophis attempted to regain her composure. She had been witness to many a great battle in her long lifetime where blood was spilled by the gallons and even magic flew like the very wind, but these two, their battle was nothing like that. Neither really used flashy magics or spilled too much blood. It looked more like one male dragon fighting another to show who was the alpha, and such fights only involved pure force of will, the very strength in their body, and the cunning they had in their minds. Even still, she knew who had won this fight. Should this sage lose this last little skirmish, Ophis knew that thanks to his abnormal healing factor, which was insanely rare even amongst beings such as them, that he would simply rise once more and be ready to dish out even more. Great Red, on the other hand, truly was on his last legs. From the way they fought, Ophis knew that this Naruto person had gotten to his current level through blood, sweat, and tears, and had fought tooth and nail to constantly keep getting stronger. Herself and Great Red had grown complacent, knowing that they were at the top until recently at least. "Fair enough, as I do want to ask some questions," Naruto grinned. With a nod to each other, the two godlike beings began to charge up their final technique. In Naruto's right hand, gale force winds began to form a vortex that dug out trenches where the winds touched the ground. In his left hand, flames that seemed to melt the very ground around them formed a similar vortex. Naruto recalled when he and Sasuke had performed this technique to destroy Kabuto and his own little Zetsu army. The redhead knew that performing the attack on his own weakened it severely because Sasuke was a much better fire user than he was, being able to recreate the blaze release, but that didn't mean that his version wasn't insanely strong. When performed in tandem with Sasuke, the jutsu had been the only jutsu to ever be marked as a triple S rank kinjutsu. His own version, while weaker, was still a double S rank. The only just stronger than this was the version he performed with Kurama. Across the way, Great Red mentally grinned as he knew he was going to lose this last little skirmish, as he could feel the amount of energy those two attacks alone had, and they were more than what he could perform right now. Fresh, he could pull off just as much destruction the two attacks could, but he wasn't fresh, far from it. Nonetheless, his pride wouldn't allow him to just give up without going down swinging. Naruto slammed the two swirling vortexes together and let it fly, calling out, "Shikuten, Korin Shippushikoku no Yazurishiki, Scorch Release, Halo Gale Jet Black Arrow Style 0. The very air around the swirling shuriken-shaped technique was almost boiling from the intense heat being emitted while the winds continued to gouge a trench into the ground several feet deep. With a mighty roar, Red unleashed his own attack, the bright red beam flattening the ground underneath its user and itself due to the pressure the attack emitted. Due to the swirling and cutting nature of the attack, Naruto's empowered Rasengan was able to carve a path straight through the beam of energy. Red closed his eyes in preparation for the technique to hit, only to barely feel the heat and cutting power graze his side. He looked behind him to see that the destructive technique had curved around him and miles away exploded, making a crater several hundred feet deep and several hundred feet across. Red only chuckled before falling to the ground in exhaustion. "You never quite explained me to why you're following me," Naruto asked as he calmly walked to his home, an equally calm Ophis walking beside him. "It's simple. You have the capacity to manhandle Great Red, and I want him out of the dimensional gap so that I may have my peace and quiet once more," Ophis calmly spoke, not even turning to look at Naruto. Naruto just shook his head as he could tell she was lying if slightly, but he wouldn't push the matter. Due to his being the child of prophecy and the container of Kurama, who was an empath, he had received a gift of sorts that allowed him to know what kind of person someone was almost instantly, and then bring out their good traits. It was the whole reason that Kakashi had taken to calling him Konoha's most surprising shinobi. It was this gift that had allowed him to bond and ultimately save Princess Koyuki, Sasami, Cheyenne, and countless others. Speaking of adventures, he wondered if he should do something similar to Jiraiya and start writing his own story, though much less perverted than Ika. Kami knows that his whole life was just as good if not better than any action, drama, or adventure book. He also wasn't a fan of his rather underhanded way of getting money right now. Using shadow clones, henge, and some minor genjutsu was easy, and being a shinobi meant that it wasn't exactly against his morals, but it was rather tedious and bothersome. As he mulled his new idea over in his head, he could sense that a certain red-headed devil was trailing him and his new house guest. He had no problem with it, as she wasn't really causing him any problems, and he'd be lying if he said that he didn't find her very attractive. He had met many beautiful women through his journey and had become quite close with a lot of them. Hell, he had housed an orange-haired vixen who had hounded him near constantly to be her mate, and had attempted to seduce him on several occasions. Being honest with himself, he had grown quite fond of Kurama during his 3-month training stint on MT Maiboku. She had been the only person he could talk to who wasn't a toad. She had also been the one constant in his life, and as a shinobi, constant people or habits were what kept you sane in an otherwise insane world. As he continued his train of thoughts, he realized that he had strayed from thinking of the bombshell she-devil on his tail, and had instead transferred over to the women who he had grown close to in his home world. Part of him was sad that he had left them behind, but another part of him knew that even had he stayed, that it wouldn't have worked out. If he had become romantically involved with any human, he would long outlive them and possibly his own children. Uzumaki longevity powered by Bijou Chakra and Senjutsu meant that he was going to live quite a long life. His ancestor Mito had lived well into her hundreds, and that was because of her Uzumaki blood alone. Kurama would have been the only candidate for perfect spouse/mate, but due to her being a Bijou and not but a construct of chakra, kids were out of the picture. With a sigh, Naruto unlocked the door to his home by biting his finger and smearing blood on the handle, which only received a quirked eyebrow from Office. Naruto merely waved off the unasked question with, "I'll explain later." He then allowed Office in before he spoke out loud, "You're more than welcome to come in, Rias." He then walked in and left the door open only for said crimson-haired devil to walk through the door and close it behind her. Both women raised an eyebrow at the other before they followed Naruto to his kitchen, where there was a chest-high island made of black marble with rather tall chairs of black wood surrounding it. The two females took a seat across from the other, and Naruto walked to his fridge. "Anybody want anything? Water? Soda? Booze?" Office spoke first, not tearing her gaze from Rias. "Water." Rias did much the same. "Tea would be lovely." Naruto nodded and grabbed the two their desired drinks, heating Rias' tea with a minor katon jutsu. He grabbed himself a beer, which Rias raised an eyebrow at. "Old enough to kill, steal, and breath fire, old enough to drink and fuck was my people's motto, more or less," Naruto said, answering her unasked question. Naruto then seated himself. "So I can assume that the both of you have some questions, most having to deal with who I am, what I am, and where I came from, right?" Both girls nodded at that. Naruto took a swig of the beer, then ran his hand through his rather long crimson hair. "Well, better get comfortable, cause it's a rather long story." By night's end, Naruto had recounted to them the rather long tale of his birth and the battle that eventually became the Fourth Shinobi World War. He had left out the smaller details like meeting Haku and such, not out of mistrust but more to keep it short and sweet. As it was, the abridged version had taken him almost 2 hours to recount, which didn't include the little Q&A portion where he had to explain some of the basics like chakra, shinobi ranks, kekai genkai, and the like to the two females. "Okay, so let me get this straight. You're a ninja sage from another dimension who near single-handedly brought ultimate peace to your world, ending generations of hate, grief, and darkness. You are also pretty much a deity-level being due to circumstances from your birth and events throughout your life which culminated in you being your world's child of prophecy. About sum it up," spoke a surprisingly calm Rias Gremry. "It was far from being single-handed, but yeah, that's the gist of it," replied the Uzumaki. "Join my peerage," spoke a now confident Rias. There was no way she could pass up the opportunity to have such an amazing power in her peerage, even if turning him took all the remaining pieces she had left. "Before I either accept or decline your offer, can I ask you one question?" Naruto asked. Rias nodded her assent. If he was really going to join her peerage, then the least she could is let him ask a few questions. "Why did you wait for that fallen to outright kill the boy? We both know that you had more than enough power to stop it from even happening in the first place," Naruto asked. Rias seemed like a decent enough girl from what he could tell, but letting the brown-haired teen die when she had the power to stop it struck Naruto as odd. There had to be some ulterior motive there. Rias sighed as the answer was one she doubted Naruto would like. In order to be able to successfully reincarnate a human or other creature into a devil, they must either be close to death or freshly dead, otherwise it would more energy, or fail completely. So does that mean that if you wanted another devil to become part of your peerage, then you could use an evil piece on them? Yes. I don't exactly know how the pieces themselves work, but I know that their purpose is twofold. Turn the receiver into a full-fledged devil and then mark them as a part of the user's peerage. Would that mean that having devils join your peerage would require less pieces due to having to use less energy to turn someone into a devil? I can't say. The only person who could fully answer that question would be their maker, one of the four Satans, Ajuka Beelzebub, Rias answered truthfully. Alright, Naruto said as he once more began to ponder on what little information he now had on the evil pieces. The things intrigued the seal's master part of him, as they functioned almost exactly as some seals would, relying on a series of formulas to complete their task. That was at least what he could gather from seeing Rias use several on the teen she had saved. So will you join my peerage then? An anxious Rias asked. Before Naruto could answer, Ophis beat him to it, finally speaking up for the first time in a while. PFD, good luck with that, girlie. Turning an irritated gaze at her fellow female, Rias finally asked the question that had been bugging her for quite some time, and who are you? I hardly feel anything from you, which means you're either a really weak devil or a regular human. Naruto turned a curious glance to the lowly theme being as he too wanted to know the answer to that particular question. Ophis had only told him her name, and that was about as much info as he could glean from her. He didn't really care too much about what she was, as such things never bothered him in the first place. One of his best friends was a massive construct of chakra that had been sealed into his stomach at birth, and his worst enemy had been a human who was not more than a sore loser who had gotten stuck in the friend zone. Species and race really meant very little to him. While Uzumaki-kun wouldn't know of me, I at least expected an heir to one of the 72 pillars to know of me, though I have grown quite adept at hiding my presence these last few centuries, Ophis said, the ever-neutral expression and monotone voice not once changing, though she did get a raised brow from the redhead Uzumaki at the added suffix to his name. Rias could only look at her wearily. If this person was strong enough to warrant her infamy amongst the 72 pillar families, then she was clearly powerful. How powerful that was, though, remained to be seen. To be short, my name is Ophis, the infinite dragon god, Ophis said, leaving a dumbfounded Rias gaping. Naruto just hummed at the information, as he himself wasn't much for titles despite his own numerous ones. Back in the elemental nations, many had taken to calling him the Nidaime Rakuta Sennin, second sage of six paths, Bijou no Tenti, master of the tailed beasts, and various other monikers likening him to his ancestor. Rias, on the other hand, was left bewildered at the information. Ophis and Great Red were said to be two of the strongest beings in existence, only being matched by the power of the true god. Not even the Seraphs or four great Satans could stand up to their power, let alone the corrosive properties of their home plane, the dimensional gap. Yet what shocked her even more was Naruto's own calm demeanor, as well as the fact that Ophis had taken such an interest in her fellow redhead. To have caught the attention of such a powerful being spoke volumes about his own power, but how he compared to Ophis remained to be seen. If Ophis had taken a liking to Naruto, then that meant he had to be somewhere close to her level, which by proxy meant that he was just as strong as any of the Satans, if not stronger. It was at this point that Rias realized that there would be no way possible for her to have Naruto join her peerage. She doubted any of the Satans, her brother included, could perform such an act. As much as I've enjoyed our conversation, I think it's about time to go on and hit the hay. I already know Ophis planning on staying here, but what about you, Rias? Naruto asked as he stretched. I wouldn't mind staying here as well, as it is already pretty late, Rias said, still lost in thought about Naruto and what made him so special. Alright, well, restrooms are upstairs, as are the bedrooms. Help yourself to anything that's here. Night, Naruto said as he himself headed in the direction of the stairs. The two women stood seated, Rias looking at Ophis questioningly. Never thought that the Ouroboros dragon would be a gothic Lolita. Being a big tit cow isn't everything, Gremory, was Ophis' monotone rebuttal. Before Rias could say anything else, Ophis had left the room, presumably to find a room for herself. The red-headed Gremory was left to silently fume at the insult before she followed Ophis and Naruto up the stairs to the bedrooms. Healing Issei without physical contact, and having that talk with Naruto had really drained her, leaving her to start feeling the effects of the day hit her now at the offer of a comfy bed. What is with this world? It seems like the world's energies are clashing with each other, like there's a stain on it. Could it be from the war? Pondered our favorite Uzumaki. He hadn't had the chance to properly acquaint himself with the natural energies of this world, and due to the large differences between his own and this world he was afraid that it would cause him problems if he tried to use Sage Mode. However, when he reached deeper into the earth, into the subconscious of the world, it seemed that it was all out of balance. He sensed remnants of what seemed to be a more potent form of the energy the angels used, although there was something very odd about them, and a heavy sense of dread and darkness that seemed to surround a dense mass of, well, for the lack of a better word, evil. The amount of malice and darkness that came from the mass was something that dwarfed that of anything that he had ever felt before. He doubted that not even the hatred that had once held a chokehold on his world could even compare to it. It all deeply troubled the redhead, as he knew that for something like that to occur meant that something cataclysmic must have happened in the past to leave such a scar on the world. It had taken decades of war, the creation of the Jubi, and the weakening of the Shinju to wound his own world, resulting in the underlying darkness that perverted the elemental nations until he had taken the burden of the world on his own shoulders to solve the problem. If it took all of that to create what happened to my world, then what the hell happened to leave this wound? Does it have anything to do with the amount of devils and angels? Does this world maybe have a dying Shinju as well? What the hell is happening here? Is something wrong, senpai? The blonde Bishonen Knight Yudo Kiba asked. Rias only sighed in response. She was currently in Ko Academy's occult research club building, which was used as a front for her peerage members and herself to go about their business. She had spent part of the morning with Naruto, an oafus who she had come to dislike for her irritating monotone voice as well as the various insults she would throw at Rias. Rias knew she was no match for the dragon god and as a result could only fume and try to insult Ophis back, which was very difficult due to her natural lack of emotion. She had left Naruto's home in a huff because of this, and was still irritated enough that her peerage could tell with just a glance. Nothing, Kiba, just go get Issei-san so we can tell him the news, alright? Rias said as she regained her composure. Of course, senpai. A few minutes later we find one Issei Hayato comically and frantically running around the room whilst pulling out his own hair, shouting random things at revelation of his being a devil. Rias was left rubbing her forehead at the boy, while Akino giggled behind her hand, Kiba's sweat dropped, and Kaneko was being Kaneko and eating a piece of cake. Before he could make even more of a fool of himself, everyone heard a masculine voice come from the window. Geez kid, calm down, is it really that big of a deal that you're a devil now? Both Kiba and Kaneko prepared themselves to combat the red-haired teen while Akino merely stood there already somewhat familiar with Naruto, only to hear their king say, Naruto-kun? What are you doing here? Many members of the room were shocked at the familiarity with which Rias spoke to her fellow redhead. Many knew that she was not one for getting too close to too many people, so to hear her use such a familiar suffix deeply confused everyone as to who this teen could be to earn such a privilege. Had some questions you might be able to answer, and the kid over there intrigues me, Naruto said from his seated position on the windowsill. Kid? What do you mean, kid? You don't look that much older than I am, yelled Issei. Fair point, but I've seen and done more than you ever could in 2 lifetimes. Have you felt the blood of your enemies coat your hands? The rush of adrenaline as you fight to stay alive just a bit longer? The pain of losing one of the few people who ever gave a shit about you? The shock of someone you consider a brother stabbing his hand through your chest because you got in the way? The occupants of the room could only stare in shock, wide-eyed. The steely look in his eyes and the slight change in his posture told them that everything he had said was the absolute truth. Even Rias was shocked by what he had said. He had given Ophis and her the abridged version of his story, and so a lot of things were left out. You intrigue me more and more, Naruto Uzumaki. Issei could only nervously shake his head in the negative. Exactly. So until the day you've gotten some actual real-world experience, I will not stop calling you kid, Naruto spoke. Rias coughed before speaking. Well, maybe I can answer your questions and explain to Issei the details about his new life all at the same time, so why not stay a bit? Naruto just shrugged before making himself comfortable on the windowsill. The redhead only quirked an eyebrow here and there when he found a similarity between Devil Society and life back in the Elemental Nations, especially when looking at the lifestyle the nobles lead. What really piqued his interest when Rias told Issei why she had specifically wanted him in her peerage. Apparently the kid held some powerful artifact called a sacred gear within him that would boost his abilities significantly. The way Rias described the item reminded him of the treasured tools that his own people had revered, the items that the Rakudo had used to defeat the Jubi. However, the idea that such a powerful tool would have virtually no drawbacks sounded a little too off to him. He understood that they were powerful tools and that Issei specifically wielded the power of a dragon, who even in his world were revered for their immense power, but still it was too good to be true. He would have to do some looking into the matter a little more himself. There had to be something more to these sacred gears. For now, the only thing you can do to raise your status in the devil world is to pass out these flyers and help the people who call on your services. Kiba can help show you the ropes, so to speak, Rias said, dismissing her knight and new pawn. Kid's got potential, especially if what you said about that sacred gear thing is true, Naruto said while gazing out at Koa Academy in slight interest. May I get you some tea, Naruto-san? Spoke the busted brunette. That would be lovely, thank you, Naruto said, taking in her appearance. He may not be a super pervert like his godfather, but that didn't mean he didn't appreciate the female form, and the brunette in front of him was a prime example of a girl blossoming into a beautiful young woman, being almost as attractive as Rias was. Rias still had the upper hand in his opinion, mostly due to her crimson locks. Rias soon took a position standing in the window where Naruto himself was seated, joining him in his gaze. So did I answer any of your questions? The Gremry heiress asked. She of course was also taking the time and their proximity to really observe her fellow redhead. He may not be able to join her peerage, but that didn't mean he couldn't be a useful ally to have, even by devil standards. It also helped that Naruto seemed to be a rather laid-back guy, with bouts of odd happiness as witnessed this morning when he had ramen for breakfast. It could also be said that he cared deeply for those he called his precious people, and would happily storm the gates of hell to help one. All in all, Rias wouldn't mind getting to know Naruto a little more. Before Naruto could answer her question, Akino appeared with her usual smile in place and a tray with the tea she had prepared. The two redheads took a seat on opposite sides of the table that held a chess board. Naruto took a sip and smiled as he quite enjoyed it. Turning to Akino, he offered her a small smile. This is some really good tea, Naruto said, trailing off as he realized he had never gotten the girl's name. Akino Himejima, Naruto-san. I am Bucho's queen, Akino said, bowing to Naruto at the end. Naruto just smiled at her again and said, and my name is Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet you, Akino-chan, and thank you for the great tea. He may not have been well-mannered, in any sense of the phrase, growing up, but both Jiraiya and Tsunade had beaten it into him, in Tsunade's case literally, that he had to at least know how to conduct himself in front of others. Turning to Rias, he calmly spoke, not all of them, but you did answer a few of my more trivial questions. Rias sighed. If they are anything like the ones you had last night, then I would say again that you would either have to ask someone like my brother or even my parents to get your answers. Naruto copied the sigh before nodding. I figured as much. Well, why don't I introduce you to my peerage in the meantime? Rias asked with a small smile. Naruto returned the gesture and nodded his assent. Well, you've met my queen Akino, and my pawn Issei. The blonde that left with him is my knight Yudo Kiba, and sitting right next to you is my rook Kaneko Tuju. Hello, was Kaneko's only greeting. What is it with this place and emotionless Lolas? Is that their export or something? Naruto thought with a deadpan look. But Rias is hiding something. There's someone here who is also tied to her in the same way the rest of her peerage is. Why is she hiding them though? Naruto thought. Being so close to them, Naruto could see that the evil pieces connected all of them through some way or another. Whether it tied them through their respective energy pools or through even deeper means, he couldn't tell. If he had to be a Kugan or something, then he would probably be able to see whatever it was that connected them clearly, but as it stood right now, all he could do was feel some sort of connection. But if she's keeping them a secret, it's probably for a good reason, and if so, why would she tell me? I'm pretty much a stranger to these people. So Kaneko, you know Senjutsu? Naruto asked. Being a sage meant that he could of course sense nature energy, and those that were more easily able to use it, and if his senses were anything to go by, then Kaneko had that in spades. Oddly though, it looked like she hadn't tapped into the energy source yet, which meant she either didn't know about it, or just didn't have someone to teach her how to use it, and with how dangerous it was to use Senjutsu, that could be a lethal mistake. How do you know of Senjutsu? Asked the shocked Loli. Naruto smirked as he looked the silver-haired girl in the eye before he began to gather the nature chakra that was present in the nearby trees. Kaneko and the others could only watch in shock as Naruto's eyes went from being shining sapphire gems to crimson red rubies. Kaneko was the only one could also see that his pupils were no longer round but were now slits, much like a cat's were. She could also see that deep, almost whisker-like marks began to appear on Naruto's cheeks, making him look even more animalistic than he already did. As he opened his mouth to talk, they could all clearly see that his canines had lengthened and become sharper. Because I'm a perfect sage, my dear little kitty. Miles away atop a rather tall building, a black-haired busted woman with cat ears and a cat tail to match awoke and narrowed her amber eyes as she felt a pulse of energy that was similar to her own. Senjutsu? But who else could use so much of it, Naya? Rias was as equally shocked by this revelation as Kaneko and Akino were. Naruto had mentioned that he was a sage but didn't mention why, so she had figured it was more of a title rather than it meaning anything. A sage, but how? A still shell-shocked Kaneko asked. It kinda runs in my family. My clan's ancestor was called the Rikudo Sennin, and my godfather was the one to actually introduce the technique to me. I was able to later master it to such a degree that people started calling me the Nidaime Rikudo Sennin. Kaneko muttered, her white hair covering her eyes from being seen. Rias and Akina looked at the girl in curiosity and concern, wondering why she had gone so quiet. While she was rather monotone, she was hardly ever quiet, and was if anything very outspoken with her thoughts on people and situations. To see her so quiet was something they hardly ever saw. Run that by me one more time, kitten, Naruto said as he released his hold on nature chakra, turning him back into the sapphire-eyed teen he usually was. Can you teach me? Kaneko asked again, only slightly louder as to barely be heard. Naruto shrugged as he picked up his cup once more. I don't see why not. I must admit that it is a rather useful thing to know, and it would be such a sad thing to waste. What Kaneko did next shocked everyone there. She hugged Naruto as hard as she could, smothering her face in his black shirt and crying small thank yous. Naruto's eyes softened as he wrapped his arms around the small girl, realizing why this meant so much to her. He didn't know the specifics, but he would hazard a guess that Senjutsu, or a sage, had been responsible for traumatizing her deeply enough that she was afraid to use her species' natural ability. In a way, she was afraid of what was essentially a rather huge part of herself, and his heart went out to her, as he knew that feeling all too well. To fear something that was with you since birth was in a way the same as being frightened of yourself, and that was never a healthy thing for the psyche. Kaneko, on the other hand, was overcome with emotion. She may have been small when it happened to her, but she knew her sister like no other, and so knew that what people had said happened was not the full truth. Nonetheless, she had seen what Senjutsu had caused and was afraid of what else it could cause. To see someone like Naruto so effortlessly use it and still maintain such a calm aura around him meant that he knew the positives and negatives to such a powerful skill. If he could teach her to do the same, then she would never have to fear the what-if situations anymore. Rias and Akino just watched on with small smiles. They both knew why this meant so much to Kaneko, and they were happy that she could finally find happiness without having that fear hanging over her head. Of course, the situation with her sister was still very much so a thing, but that didn't mean that she couldn't enjoy the happiness that Naruto had brought to her life. You just keep getting more and more interesting, don't you, Naruto? Rias thought. Breathe slowly, Kaneko. Do not let anything bother you. You must be like nature, stoic and unperturbed, a calm Naruto said as he stood over his new white-haired student. After agreeing to train the young Nekishu, Naruto had seen fit to start bringing her to his home after school each day and when she wasn't busy with contracts. They would meditate in his own personal sanctuary that he had built specifically for that purpose. It wasn't anything too special, with a small pond at its center with various mid-sized trees encasing the clearing and an assortment of other greenery to add some color and life to the place, not to mention making it easier to practice senjutsu. Although it served its purpose well, giving any who wanted some much-desired peace and quiet away from the hustle and bustle of the city, Naruto had found that he much preferred the grove in the city park over his own thanks to the critters that called it home. His own little sanctuary lacked the warmth and energy that came with animal life. Kaneko was situated in the middle of the pond atop a smooth gray rock that protruded just above the shallow and calm waters. Her breathing was perfectly regulated and came slowly and evenly, filling her with the energy that filled the room. Naruto stood barefoot and shirtless just behind her, letting the cool water of the pond coalesce around his ankles. A small smile appeared on his face as he looked down at his young Nekishu apprentice. It had taken a few weeks of arduous work to get her to this point. The hard part had nothing to do with Kaneko's capacity for meditation. In fact, the rook was a natural at it. What had made the past few weeks so hard had been her deeper emotions and fears of senjutsu. She may have acted stoic and emotionless in front of almost everybody, but deep down she was just a scared young girl with a plethora of built-up emotions, most of them negative. It had taken quite a bit of time and effort for Naruto to bring down the walls that she had built around herself. When he had finally succeeded, the young Nico had been rather emotional. Did she still hold any fear of senjutsu? Not at all. Did she still have some problems with the sister that had abandoned her? Very much so. Despite that, though, Naruto had been able to encourage her to move past those feelings and save them for the appropriate time. Kaneko was still mostly the person she had been since she was young, a stoic, blunt, young girl with a penchant for sweet treats and dislike for perverts. However, she had taken quite the liking to her sensei, and whenever he was around she could be found seated on his lap or at his side clutching his arm, the whole time a barely noticeable blush present on her otherwise blank face. Naruto had of course only chuckled and let the girl be, as he remembered acting almost the same way with the Sandaime when he was younger. In the same way that the old Kage had been a role model for him, he was now a role model for Kaneko. She still didn't exactly know how skilled he was with senjutsu, as, other than the one time in the club room, he hadn't used Sage Mode or even any nature chakra around her or any of the Occult Research Club members. Speaking of said members, he had gotten to know all of them quite well. He and Akino could frequently be found talking and sharing a few laughs with each other, usually because Naruto was telling her one of his pranking stories from his youth. That, or they were simply sharing a cup of tea that the Busta Devil had made. Naruto and Kiba had bonded over their mutual love of swordplay, and were usually sparring with each other when the chance arose. The spars were never serious, both using Bakken and talking as they traded blows. Kiba had yet to best Naruto in any of their skirmishes, but enjoyed them and appreciated the chance to improve that the spars presented. Naruto enjoyed torturing Issei a great deal. He would often treat the wannabe harem king the same way Kakashi had once treated him, and when he wasn't confusing or irritating the pervert, he was pranking him because of his perverted tendencies. Rias and the rest of her peerage would often get a good laugh or two from watching the pervert suffer. Even Office had cracked a smile after a particularly elaborate prank that had left Issei wearing lacy lingerie and locked in the female locker rooms where the kendo club had found him. Needless to say, Issei hadn't been able to show his face around school without being laughed at for a while. His relationship with Rias was interesting to say the least. The Gremry heiress was treating Naruto like a puzzle and was trying to figure him out. Why, Naruto had no idea. That wasn't to say the two weren't friendly with each other, far from it. In fact, the redhead could be found with him as often as Kaneko. She wasn't as physically clingy as her rook, but she had no qualms invading his personal space bubble. This had become even more apparent after Naruto had managed to beat his fellow redhead at a game of chess. When she had explained that it was similar in concept to shogi, Naruto had agreed to a match thinking it would be fun. A half hour later, a wide-eyed Akino and Rias stared at a smiling Naruto as he claimed Rias king. After that, if Rias wasn't in the clubroom or in class, she was either at Naruto's home or with the Uzumaki himself. It had become worse, or better, depending on who you asked, when the sage had awoken one morning to a fully nude Rias using him as her personal pillow. Had the former Jinchuriki been any less of a man, he probably would have passed out from a massive nosebleed or become extremely frantic at the sight. However, being friends with Anko and the student of not one but two perverts, one a self-declared super pervert, had left Naruto a little dulled to such things, though, especially after 3 years of following Jiraiya into various brothels and strip clubs for information. Sure, his instincts were practically screaming at him to take the devil right then and there, and he would be lying if he said that he hadn't been highly aroused by the view, but he was still Naruto Uzumaki, and Naruto Uzumaki's willpower was the stuff of legends. All of this meant that when Rias awoke, she was shocked to find Naruto not ogling her lustfully or panicking over her naked presence, but simply gazing out his window as the sun slowly began to rise over the horizon. While being nude didn't bother her in the least, she knew that her figure could turn the heads of any man, and some women, even fully clothed. She was further shocked when Naruto gave her a simple, "Good morning, sleepyhead," before getting out of the bed and heading to the kitchen to make breakfast. After that, it became a routine for Rias to sleep with Naruto in his bed. She also became even more fervent in her pursuit to know more about Naruto, though trying to get a rise out of him. Those sexual advances had been added to that mission list as well. Opha's relationship with Naruto was an odd one. She wasn't always around, off doing whatever it was a dragon god did, but when she was around, she wasn't too far from Naruto. The gothic Lolita would usually return with questions about Naruto, and more often than not he would answer her truthfully. None of the questions were too prying, but were more probing in nature instead, a little more subtle than Rias' own way of trying to get his story. Ophis had also taken to mocking Rias in her ever monotone voice any chance she got, and this had sparked a sort of rivalry, although nobody could tell if it was reciprocated or not, as Ophis' blank face made it very difficult to discern her thoughts and feelings. All in all, it had been an interesting few weeks for all of them. Naruto felt a little more comfortable getting close to all of them, knowing that as devils them dying of old age was very unlikely, if it was even a possibility at all. That was another reason that Naruto had entertained the idea of getting to know both Kaneko and Rias on a more personal level. He dearly missed the relationships he had back home, but the redhead had long ago realized that he would have to come to terms with both his own immortality and his friends' and pseudo-family's mortality. With Rias and her peerage, though, that wasn't exactly a dilemma. Rias had once let it slip that her elder brother Surzex was actually a few centuries old, and her father and mother were much older than that as well, yet her brother looked no older than 20-something and her parents were much the same. Even with this knowledge, though, Naruto was a little wary of starting any sort of relationship like that. It was true that he had zero enemies in this world, with not one soul knowing his past and who he really was, with Rias, Kaneko, and Office only knowing bits and pieces of it at the most. Still, his instincts were telling him that something big was in the works, and he had no doubts that he would more than likely be pulled into whatever it was, whether he liked it or not. He had a strong feeling that it involved whatever it was that had left a scar on the planet, and that odd light power that was with it. For now, though, he would focus on getting everybody as ready as he possibly could, starting with Kaneko and her senjutsu. Good, Kaneko. Feel the energy that flows through the trees, the water, and even in the ground. Let it come to you, Naruto coached. Despite not showing any outward sign that she had heard him, he knew that Kaneko was hanging on his every word. The smile on his face grew larger as he noticed that the nature chakra present in his little grove was flowing towards Kaneko in manner similar to a calm river's flowing waters. In fact, the water of the pond began to ripple and form small, barely noticeable rivers as the nature energy flowed over it to get to the young Nekishu. This method was a lot harder than the way he had accomplished his sage training, as he had been exposed to massive amounts of nature chakra thanks to the toads of empty Mayaboku. But unlike him, Kankyo didn't need to adjust her body and energy pathways to the power that nature chakra offered. The Nekishu race looked to be born with a natural inclination to the earthly energy source, almost like the Uzumaki, Senju, and Uchiha clans. The aforementioned clans had this because of their common ancestor, the Rikudo Sennin. Naruto hadn't the foggiest idea why the Nekishu had the same, if not much stronger, link to nature, but he wasn't a scientist or historian, so it didn't really concern him all that much. Okay, now you have to be very careful. You're going to experience a spike in power that will make you feel like you can take on the world. Don't react to it. You must maintain your calm and properly regulate the nature chakra throughout your body before you can even think of using it, Naruto lectured in a soft voice so as not to disturb Kaneko. Heeding Naruto's words, Kaneko managed to quell the urge to burst out in happiness at the feeling of nature's energy flowing through her. She had experienced the sensation before several times, but this time was different because she wasn't being controlled by her fear of the power or the power itself. She was one with the power of nature, and with that came a sense of surreal calm and awakening. As soon as she felt that she had a proper handle on the nature chakra within her, the silver-haired rook opened her eyes and had to resist the urge to do something out of character. Thanks to the senjutsu, she could now see much differently than what most anyone could. Before her she saw the life force of everything in the grove. The plants, the little bugs that scurried to and fro in the underbrush of the bushes, the small fish that Naruto had in the pond. It was like seeing for the first time, but with the self-aware realization of the act. Kaneko turned with a huge grin on her face, ready to hug the life out of the person responsible for this whole thing, but was stopped because as soon as she turned to where Naruto was behind her, she had to quickly close her eyes, letting out a yelp of pain at being blinded. This all caused her to lose her control on the nature chakra, and with that control went the energy itself. Luckily, before she could fall into the shallow pond and get herself wet, she was caught by a chuckling Naruto. What happened?" Kaneko asked as she rubbed her eyes to get rid of the spots that still flitted in her vision. Well, you looked at me," Naruto chuckled. "Why was I blinded though?" Kaneko asked as the spots started to finally clear from her eyesight. "Well, when you use senjutsu, your senses all get a pretty big boost, and your vision allows you to see things that no normal eye, devil or otherwise, could ever show you. What you saw was the energy that is present in all life, chakra." Naruto took a break in his speech, noticing that due to her rapid increase then decrease in power, Kaneko was left feeling pretty drained. The redhead picked up the young Nekishu bridal style and started heading for the main part of the house. "You may not be able to see it as clearly as my friend Niji's clan was able to, but it was still visible to you. Unfortunately, despite the lowered clarity, my chakra reserves are still large enough to have blinded you. Niji once said that when he looked at me it was like looking directly into the sun through a pair of sunglasses." Naruto wasn't at all surprised when he found Rias and Office in the kitchen, the former glaring at the latter. However, Rias instantly took notice of her rook, who was currently snoozing and snuggling deeper into the sage's chest. "What happened?" Rias asked, concerned. Naruto just shook his head. "Nothing bad. She's just tired from using senjutsu. A good nap and she'll be good to go." Rias smiled gratefully at Naruto for the reassurance. Her peerage was an extension of her family, so all of them meant more than she could say. She of course knew she wouldn't always be there to rescue them, and even that there were people far stronger than her around that wouldn't hesitate to do some less than savory things to them. Luckily, Naruto had wandered into their lives, and even with as little as she knew about her fellow redhead, she felt comfortable trusting that he would be there whenever they needed him to be. Interesting creatures, humans. Don't you agree? Before Naruto responded, he observed the man that now stood to his right, sharing his position atop a rather tall building looking over the city of Kuo. Out of his peripheral vision, Naruto could see that the man was well into his years, looking to be somewhere in his 40s with red and blue eyes and matching gelled hair. If Naruto wasn't friends with an Uchiha and Hyuga, he probably would have considered the man's eyes to be odd, but as it was, he barely raised an eyebrow. The man continued, unperturbed by Naruto's lack of response, capable of amazing acts of bravery and intelligence, as well as power beyond what many think is possible, even by devil standards. Naruto decided to voice his own opinion. Yes, but they are also capable of enough depravity, greed, and maliciousness to make one wonder who the real devils are. If the man was surprised by Naruto's answer, he didn't show it. I see that you speak from experience, which is surprising for one as young as yourself. Your eyes, though, they betray your body. And what do you mean by that? Naruto asked, genuinely curious. The man glanced at Naruto for a brief moment before returning his gaze to the city below. Your body says you are still young and innocent, yet your eyes tell the story of a man who has gone through hell. A man who has loved and lost, whom has experienced the highs and lows of life. A man many decades older than you appear to be. Naruto nodded, as a certain vixen he knew had once told him something similar. He then sighed before speaking again. Thus is the price of war. The price of human ambition, perverted by darkness. The man slowly nodded in response, agreeing to Naruto's sullen statement. Even now your eyes show that you are a loving person, willing to go to great lengths to help those close to you, or even those you barely know. Despite the hardships you have experienced, you've managed to hold on to your happiness and sense of self. Impressive. Neither said anything for a while, enjoying the quiet that was only broken by the noises of the city below them. Naruto. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki. An interesting name. Maelstrom Wavewind Whirlpool. The man then turned to Naruto fully, stretching out his hand. When Naruto firmly grasped it, the man smiled, Mephistopheles. The two returned to looking out over the city once more. After a few minutes, Naruto broke the calm silence again. I have a feeling you may be able to answer some questions that I have. I may, depending on what those questions are. Do you know what a shinju is? My oh my, I haven't heard that term in a long while, but yes, I do. Then it's safe to assume that this world has a shinju? Mephisto just nodded in agreeance. The shinju, it's hurt or dying, isn't it? That is a difficult question to answer. Naruto turned a curious look towards Mephisto. How so? I'm assuming you are aware of the three factions and their leaders, correct? Naruto just nodded. Well, in a time before recorded history, there was a shinju. However, due to some event or other, its power was split into a number of pieces. These fragments gained sentience and became the various gods and goddesses, some stronger than others due to having more of the shinju's energies. What was left formed the first generation of devils and other creatures. Can you be more specific? Mephisto sighed. I'm afraid not. As I said, this was before recorded history, and most of the gods and goddesses from that time are either dead or have passed down their power. The same can be said for the devils of that era. As a result, very few remember or even have knowledge of that time. Naruto also sighed before gesturing for his companion to continue. As far as I know, the Christian God decided that, since he had such a vast amount of power, more than all but a handful of beings, he would split it into three parts. Part of that divided energy gave birth to his servants, the angels. The other kick-started the growth of life on this here planet. A couple of centuries later, which is nothing to immortals like them, humans had become sentient and self-aware. They had become rational beings not unlike the one that had given birth to them. That answers a few things I was wondering about, and I now have an idea of what it is that I can feel permeating this world. But one last question. There is a darkness that coexists with the light that I believe to be the remnants of that God. What is it? That is the darkness itself. I'm sure you know of the balance between light and dark, correct? Mephisto inquired, seemingly shaken by something. Of course. It's a basic rule of life, that there can be no light without darkness and vice versa, Naruto answered. He had become acquainted with that particular philosophy when he saw that, although peace had come to the elemental nations, there were still bandits, thieves, murderers, and other such vile people. Although the numbers of such criminals and the frequency of their depredations had dropped severely, they had never been the problem in the first place. The source of the hatred and greed that was the cycle of life had been the hidden villages and ultimately the ancestors of the Senju and Uchiha, Hagoromo's own two sons, Indra and Azura. Ironically, Madara and Obito had played a huge part in the bringing about of peace. It had been under threat of the Eye of the Moon plan that all the hidden villages discarded any distrust or hatred of each other and banded together, united in their desire to maintain their free will. Ages of darkness had brought about an age of light. Yes, well, being that the Shinju, in and of itself, is life in the purest form means that it has equal parts dark and light, Mephisto continued. Naruto nodded again. The darkness of his world Shinju gave birth to the monster that was the Jubi. The light of the Shinju had turned Hagoromo Otsutsuki into the famed Rikudo Sennin. The light gave life to the deities and the devils and such. The dark, however, birthed something else. I do not know the full story, but I do know that whatever it was eventually caused the death of the Christian god and several other deities. Naruto had to resist the urge to facepalm at the information. Of course, this world Shinju turned itself into a damn deity-level monster. He had managed to stop Obito and Madara from unleashing the wrath of an incomplete Jubi, but his furry former tenant had explained that had they not been able to, there would have been very little hope for them as, even incomplete, the monstrous Jubi was a force of nature unto itself. Not even the combined might of herself and the Hachibi could hope to compare to the immense power that was the Shinju incarnate. What made Naruto so annoyed was that he had no doubt that through some occurrence or another he would find himself having to either stop someone from awakening the beast or stopping the beast itself, something which he doubted would be even remotely possible, even with him using Sage Mode and every other trick that he had in his bag. Nonetheless, Naruto turned to the well-dressed Mephisto. Thank you for the information, it was indeed very helpful. No problem at all. Now may I ask a question of you? Mephisto spoke. When Naruto nodded, the elder man continued, what exactly are you, Uzumaki-san? I can sense that you are indeed powerful, immensely so in fact, but I cannot tell if you are a devil, angel, or even a dragon, and I have been around long enough to acquaint myself with almost every race that exists here on Earth, in the underworld, and even those that reside in heaven. The redhead chuckled at the question and the annoyance that he seemed to be causing the elder devil. Well, I can tell you for sure that I am none of those things. Mephisto racked his brain for an answer but refused to acknowledge the one possibility. After some time of racking his brain, he finally came to a seemingly impossible conclusion. You can't be human, can you? Again Naruto chuckled, this time at the expression of obvious confusion and shock on his new friend's face. Once upon a time, although even that is debatable thanks to the circumstances surrounding both my birth and my mother. But no, I don't think I can say I am human anymore. Mephisto's face grew even more confused at the vague answer. Then what are you? Naruto shrugged with an amused smile firmly in place, nothing but a wandering sage looking to see all the world has to offer. As soon as Naruto had uttered the last syllable, he was gone in a flash of crimson. Mephisto laughed aloud at the answer as well as the speedy exit. You are a most interesting character, Uzumaki-san. I wonder what surprises you'll have in the future. As Naruto was walking back to his home, getting the occasional odd stare for his choice in clothes, he noticed that both Rias and Issei were talking to a young girl who looked to be around Kaniko's age. The girl was dressed in what looked to be a nun's habit, if Naruto had to guess, and had blonde hair that was just a few shades darker than his own hair's former color. Rias was the first one of the small group to notice him, and waved him over with a small smile on her face. Naruto returned the smile and strolled up to them, offering a grin to the nervous young girl. Hey Rias-chan, perv, the Uzumaki said with his foxy grin still in place, looking at Issei. Issei decided it would be best for him not to respond to the jab, and so he only nodded. Naruto turned to the young nun, and who would you be? The blonde girl smiled brightly up at Naruto. My name is Asia Argento. I wouldn't recommend doing what you're about to do, Rias, Naruto muttered to his fellow red as they walked back to Ko Academy, Issei trailing behind them just out of earshot. Rias turned a stiff glance at Naruto, realizing that he knew what she was planning to do. Remembering that Naruto was far more experienced when it came to leading people than she was, she decided to at least hear the sage out before continuing any further. Seeing Rias was willing to listen to him, Naruto called out to Issei, a perv. Me and Rias-chan have some stuff to talk about. Tell everyone that we'll be back in a few. Before Issei could even get annoyed at Naruto's nickname for him, the two redheads were gone in a crimson flash. The sage and devil duo reappeared at a small cafe only a few minutes' walk from the academy. The place had caught Naruto's attention when he had gone out with Kaniko after one of their daily training sessions. It had the kind of sweets that appealed to the Nico's taste buds, and the sense of warmth and comfort it gave off reminded him of a certain ramen stand that he had frequented throughout his life. It also helped that the owner of the place, a Keisuke Yamada, reminded him of Tuchiya Chiraku a great deal and even had a daughter who worked at the cafe with him. Naruto was saddened to find that they didn't serve the sweet ambrosia that was ramen, but could make do with the sweets and tea they made. Speaking of the father-daughter duo, Fuyumi appeared with a bright smile at the table Naruto and Rias occupied. Ohio Uzumaki-kun. What can I get you and your friend today? the waitress asked, giving Naruto a wink when she said friend. Fuyumi was a cute young woman only a year or so older than Naruto, and stood at the tall, for a Japanese woman, height of 5 foot 6 inches with doe brown eyes and chestnut hair that fell in slight waves to just below her shoulders. Naruto gave the girl a friendly smile. I'll have the usual, thanks Fuyumi-chan. Rias glanced at the menu before turning to the waitress, and I'll have green tea and a taiyaki, 1. The brunette gave the two another bright smile before saying, coming right up. Be back in a few. Wanting to ease into the inevitable seriousness that would soon pervade their conversation, Rias spoke, would I be right in guessing that you know this place so well because of Kaneko? Naruto gave his fellow redhead a small chuckle before nodding his head in assent. Yeah, that girl does love her sweets. But the owners of this place are also really nice people and the atmosphere is comfortable. Rias looked around at the modestly furnished cafe, with comfortable-looking black leather chairs alongside clear plastic tables. There was also a small stage with a mic and acoustic guitar, leading Rias to assume that they had an open mic night. The walls were painted a light black, and there were curtains of the same color draped over the windows to make the room much cooler than it was outside as well as block out the sun. The far wall behind the mini-stage, however, was a huge chalkboard that various people had doodled and written different things on. There were even several very well-done drawings that caught Rias' eye for a few seconds. The customers all talked quietly and among their own little groups, but it was clear that they were all content. All in all, the place had a very calm and welcoming atmosphere that betrayed its rather large size and the amount of people who occupied the various chairs and tables. Yeah, it's a really great place to come and just be among friends, the Gremry heiress said with a small smile. Within a minute of saying that, Fuyumi had come back to the table carrying Rias' tea and cake along with Naruto's usual, which consisted of a cup of iced coffee and a biscuit. Here are your orders. Let me know if you need anything else, and with another smile Fuyumi took her leave. The two redheads began quietly eating their food and enjoying each other's presence. To the other patrons of the restaurant, other than their striking hair color, the two looked like a regular teen couple out on a lunch date. What do you mean I can't go near Asia-chan? Issei shouted angrily. Rias sighed as she rubbed her forehead in frustration at her pawn's seemingly selective hearing. He had ignored her saying that he could see Asia on their territory and instead latched on to not being allowed to go to the church, resulting in her current annoyance. Gaki, pay attention, would ya? Rias-chan didn't even say that, so you're getting upset for no reason, Naruto spoke from his spot on the couch. As per usual, a certain Nico was happily occupying his lap whilst indulging her sweet tooth. Rias shot Naruto a grateful look before continuing, you have to understand, Issei, now that you're a devil there are rules you have to abide by and things to be aware of. One of those things is your weakness to anything having to do with the biblical God, churches and the like included. How does that have anything to do with me seeing Asia-chan? A still frustrated pawn questioned. Baka. If you hadn't noticed, that Asia girl is a nun, which means she lives in the church. We're not saying you can't see her at all, but that there are certain restrictions you have to abide by, and equally frustrated Naruto shot back. Geez, if this is what I was like when I was younger, it's no wonder people got irritated with me. Gigi must have had the patience of a saint to put up with me. The brunette pawn finally huffed, showing that he finally understood, though he didn't necessarily like it. Issei then bowed to Rias. I apologize, Rias-senpai. Rias only sighed and nodded her head at him, keeping her arms crossed. I'm just trying to look out for you, Issei. Issei grudgingly nodded back, before turning and walking out the door. The Gremry heiress sighed yet again as she plopped herself down into a chair tiredly. Only seconds later, Akino was setting a tray of tea down on the table. Rias gave her queen and best friend a small smile of gratitude. It'll all play out alright, Rias-chan. Kid's stubborn as hell, but deep down he knows that you're right and that you only have his best interests at heart. Just give him some time and he'll come around, Naruto calmly said as he stroked a purring Kaneko's hair. Thank you, Naruto-kun, for everything. That could have gone terribly if you hadn't helped out, Rias said, honestly expressing her feelings of deep gratitude to her fellow redhead. Naruto gave her smile before picking up his senjutsu student and placing her on the couch, causing the young girl to pout. After stretching out some kinks that he had gained from sitting for so long, Naruto spoke up again. No problem, Rias-chan. Always happy to help, but right now there's something I gotta check out. Rias rose as well and stepped to his side as the Uzumaki opened the window, letting in the cool afternoon breeze. Well, is it something I can help you with? It's the least I could do in return. Naruto just gave the busted devil a warm smile before engulfing her in a hug. When Rias felt Naruto's arms circle around her body and the accompanying warmth that seemed to constantly exude from his person, she blushed heavily. The two had been closer and much more intimate before, what with Rias finding Naruto's bed preferable to her own, but it had pretty much always been her that initiated the contact. In one move the sage had managed to do something that nobody else had been able to, getting Rias to feel something foreign to her. How far this romantic attraction she had for the enigmatic and powerful being went, and what it meant for them in the future remained to be seen, but if Rias had any say in it she was going to try and make sure it meant something. Thanks for volunteering, but it's nothing I can't handle. I might be gone for a few days, but if you need anything just throw this somewhere and I'll be there as fast as I can, okay? Naruto said, handing her an intricately designed kunai. The metal was a black so dark that it seemed to absorb the light around it, and etched into the metal was a series of complex and overlapping symbols and words that confused and intrigued the Gremory heiress. What is this for exactly? Rias asked curiously. Both Akino and Kaneko were also equally curious about the strange blade and were staring at it along with their king. You know how I do that flash thing? A grinning Naruto asked. No matter how old he got, he would always be excited to brag about one of his moves, especially one that his father had created and that he had then improved upon. When Naruto saw all three of the girls nod their heads in affirmation, he continued, well, that technique was actually created by my father, with my mother's assistance. Originally he had to use tri-pronged kunai with markings similar to that to mark where he wanted to flash to. When he died he had been working on a way to eliminate the need for the markers, so when I got my hands on his notes for the technique I continued where he left off and was able to perfect it, and eliminate the need for the markers by combining it with a power that my mom passed down to me. But I do still know how to use the technique with the markers and they do have their benefits. They act like flares, don't they? Rias asked, surprising Naruto. People had always asked why he still made markers when he had mastered the technique already, and he had always had to explain it to them in detail, yet Rias guessed it from just hearing him explaining the basics of the technique. Yeah, they do. When they're thrown or plunged into something they start sending out pulses of energy to me, and so allow me to know exactly where you are so I can then flash there at the speed of light. That's a very interesting technique. Your parents must have been geniuses to come up with such an impressive move, using nothing more than a few rune-like symbols and their own power. But I am curious. What is the technique called? Akino commented. Yeah, my father was actually considered a prodigy, and hailed as a hero because of this technique as well as his other unique jutsu. With just the two moves he was able to wipe out a whole battalion of enemy nin in the blink of an eye. It earned him the moniker of Kuroi Senko, Yellow Flash, and a flee-on-sight order from our enemies that had never been heard of before. The two moves themselves were called the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God Technique, and the Rasengan, Spiraling Sphere, Naruto said, looking up at the sky, losing himself in thoughts of his parents, and how they would feel about the decisions he'd made. This was not lost on any of the girls or Kiba and Issei, who had made their way into the clubroom as quietly as possible after seeing the look in the sage's eyes. Rias decided that this would be good time to unravel more of the mystery that was Naruto before he left for the next few days. And what about your mother? She was just as feared and revered as my father, and was known across the nations as the Konoha no Beneheim, Crimson/Bloody Princess of the Leaf. My father was good at seals, far more than almost everybody else, but my mother? She was a master at them. Everything my father knew about seals he learned from her. She was also known to be deadly with a blade. Naruto turned to Rias with a look in his eyes and a smile on his face that shook her and caused her to begin to blush heavily. He then reached his hand out and softly grabbed a strand of Rias' striking hair. You two actually have a lot in common. She also had fiery red hair and a natural sense of beauty that left even my father in awe. She originally hated her hair since she was teased because of it as a child, but grew to love it because my father said that it was one of the reasons he had fallen for her. Naruto then laughed and turned his gaze back to the sky, leaving a weak-kneed Rias to try and regain her composure. When I met my mother later in life, I actually told her that I wished that I had her red hair instead of my father's blonde. Funnily enough, that came true after I said it. Kiba chose this time to ask his own question. Naruto-senpai, you were blonde originally? Yup, though my hair was a much darker shade than yours. People used to say that it was sun-kissed. What were their names? Kaneko asked quietly. And to the shock of everyone there, they saw Naruto's sapphire eyes glisten before they saw a few tears trail down his face. No one had expected that. For the short time they had known him, they had all begun to see Naruto as a pillar of strength that could never crack or crumble, a powerful being that stood above most, and yet before them there he stood, a sage and a man that had done and seen so much throughout his short life, crying at the memories of his parents. My father was Minato Namikaze and my mother was Kushina Uzumaki. No one said anything for a while, too shocked to say much of anything. Issei, however, was the one to break it. What happened to them? The girls shot him a nasty look at asking such a question in such a brazen manner, and even Kiba shook his head in disappointment. Naruto's eyes became dull, yet still he wore a small smile that showed the conflicting of emotions that ran through him. They died on the day I was born. Sacrificed their lives so that I could live mine, and also gave me the power and tools to become the person I am today. Again, no one said a word or made a move. Rias was left in shock at all she was finding out about this man that had stepped into her life. She knew that he had fought in a war, was raised and trained to be a killer, and could see that the kind of person he was, but in this moment she was finding out more than she had ever been able to when she asked questions about him. He was almost baring his naked soul to them. Sure, she knew there was more to him, more people who affected him and other events that molded him, but the emotions that were seen in his eyes and heard in his voice when he talked about his parents showed that they meant a lot to Naruto. Kaneko was equally as shocked. To her he was her pillar, a standard to which she could and should compare herself to her. He was her sensei, a powerful being who had mastered an art that could make someone as powerful as a god, yet he never let that go to his head. Naruto was a humbled man, a light to her and those whose lives he had touched. To see her sensei, her role model, her pillar look so fragile and so human made her admire him even more. If he could reach heights that so many sought to without sacrificing who he was, without giving up the bonds and people who shaped him, then so could she. By bearing his flaws, his humanity, Naruto had become even more perfect to Kaneko. Kiba was lost in his own thoughts. Naruto was something of a measuring bar for Kiba. He far outclassed the knight in almost every aspect, and yet was still someone you would be proud to call a friend. Kiba also knew that there was more to Naruto, a lot more, and that quite a bit of it was much darker and more horrifying than losing his parents at birth. Kiba had a feeling that his own dark past with a certain church experiment paled in comparison to Naruto's shadowed past, but if Naruto could conquer that to become stronger and stand taller, then so could Kiba. Issei was left feeling both inadequate and grounded at the same time. Here he was complaining about becoming a devil and whining about not being able to see a girl he had not even known for an hour, and then there was Naruto. He had lost his parents when he was born. That alone shook Issei. What would he be like if he didn't have his parents? Would he even be alive without the two people that loved him unconditionally and had cared for him without expecting anything in return? The love of a parent was something that could never be replicated or replaced. Naruto had lived his life never knowing that love. The Queen Akino was also shaken up by the whole thing. On some level she connected with Naruto, having lost her parents at a young age. Yet that also meant that she couldn't connect with Naruto. She had known the love of her parents, the warmth of a mother's hug, and the security of a father's arms for as short as it was. Naruto hadn't, never had, and probably never would experience any of those things. It saddened her to know that someone so amazing had suffered something like that. Naruto turned his head to them, unashamedly showing the sadness in the form of tears trekking down his cheeks, and smiled. Sorry for that. Didn't mean to dump all of that on you guys, and don't worry, Issei. Was only natural that you asked that question. Naruto then fully turned and gave a tight, warm hug to each of the girls. Rias returned the gesture and even pecked him on the cheek. Kaneko just nuzzled her head into his chest and clung to him tightly. Akino smiled a genuine smile and returned the hug. Kiba and him shared a firm handshake before he ruffled Issei's hair jokingly. Well, I'll be back in a few days. Try not to get into too much trouble. And with a last laugh and smile, Naruto was gone in a crimson flash. Bucho? Akino spoke. Yes, Akino? I just realized something. Uzumaki-kun said that his parents died when he was born, right? Rias turned a curious glance at Akino. Yes, he did. Why are you asking, though? Akino shook her head, because he said that he met his mother later in life, and the way he spoke about the two meant that he had met them both personally. Are you suggesting that he was lying, Akino? Akino immediately waved her hands in defense. Of course not, Bucho. But I'm saying that there's more to it. Dead people just don't come back to life, even for a short time, unless there was some foul play or something. You're right. There's still a lot more that he's not telling us, Rias said resolutely, gripping the kunai Naruto had given to her chest. Damn it! A sweaty and frustrated Rias cursed. We find said red-haired devil in a predicament she would have rather not be in. The day before, Issei had found out that the young nun he had made friends with was actually the holder of a very potent healing sacred gear. On top of that, she was being held against her will at the church by several fallen and excommunicated priests and exorcists. Her situation went from bad to worse as the nun overheard one of the fallen talking about forcibly taking her gear out of her, even if it meant her death. She had barely been able to get the message out to Issei before they found her, and she was taken back to the church, presumably so that the fallen could go through with their plan. Issei had of course been vehement that they go and help Asia and save her life. At first Rias had been against the idea because she didn't want to disturb the balance that was the ceasefire between the three factions. It was at that time that something odd happened. Yo-yo time for a flashback, kiddies. Issei, you have to understand that dash was as far as Rias got before there was a poof of smoke in the middle of the club room. All members were instantly on guard, knowing that only people keyed into the protective runes and charms could teleport into the room directly without Rias' say or prior knowledge. Everyone's eyebrow rose as in the middle of the room, seated on its haunches, was a rather large, the size of a kitten, amphibian wearing a sleeveless kimono top. What was even stranger was that the toad was munching on what looked to be several sticks of pocky. The thing then turned its gaze to Rias and her peerage before raising a flipper hand limb and casually called, "Yo." Issei was the only one to freak out, as Rias had yet to explain to him what familiars were, which is what everybody thought the small thing was. It then turned its eyes to Rias before hopping onto the desk in front of her. Red hair? Check. Porcelain skin? Yup. Large assets? Haha, check. Boss sure knows how to pick 'em. Rias had to refrain herself from hurting the toad at the assets comment, if only out of curiosity as to how it knew who she was and who its boss was. Era, and who would your boss be, Toad-san? A curious Akino asked. The boss glanced at Akino out of its peripheral vision before turning its attention back on Rias. Sorry, girly, boss didn't mention you, so I can't disclose that info. I'm just here to deliver a message from boss to you, Gremryheim. Rias only rose an eyebrow at the title. Well then, can I have the message? The toad chuckled. Right, sorry. The clothed toad then cleared its throat before continuing. Rias, that cute little nun that the perv made friends with is in big trouble. The fallen that have her are acting outside of the orders of the Grigori governor, so you can take care of them without worrying about any political backlash. The humans have also been excommunicated from the church, so they are free game as well. Rias' eyes widened as she realized who had sent the toad. Your boss is Naruto-kun? The toad then gave her a thumbs up somehow. Yup. We toads are the personal summons of Naruto-Oyaban. Wait, so it's not just you then? A curious Kiba asked. He had heard of powerful devils being able to have several familiars, but the way the toad worded it made it sound like there were more than just a few of them. Nope. Boss usually uses me to deliver messages. When he needs battle help though, he'll call on Gamakichi, though Gamabunta also likes to come out every so often, but since boss has gotten so strong recently he hasn't really needed the help, so him and Buntajiji usually just sit around and drink. Kaneko chose this time to chime in. Wait, you're the toads who taught Naruto-senpai how to use senjutsu, aren't you? While still munching on the pocky, the toad answered, well, not me personally. That was Shimaba-sama and Fukasakuja-sama. So where is Naruto-senpai? Kaneko asked. Truth be told, she had been missing Naruto quite a bit, and it had only been a few days since he had left. She still kept up with her senjutsu training so that when Naruto did come back she could show him what she could do. Oh well, boss said you might ask that. He kinda told me not to tell you guys that bit of information, only that he would probably be back in another day or two. The toad began to sweat as a deadly aura surrounded Rias, and she set a glacial stare at the toad. Do you know where Naruto-kun is? Yes, the toad replied in such a small voice it almost went unheard. Where is he? And it came out not in the form of a question but as a demand. Gotta go be. And with a poof of smoke the toad was gone. Back to the Future. Haha, get it? 'Cause it's a movie, and yeah, I'll just go now. After that little incident, Rias had decided to help Issei save Asia. What she hadn't expected though was a psychopathic exorcist with a fetish for killing devils, for mildly powerful fallen, and a league of annoying rogue priests. Under normal circumstances her and her peerage could have dealt with them all with relative ease, but it seemed that the fallen had been prepared and had the priests coat the inside of the church with charms that weakened devils. As it was, they could still pull out a win, but it would be a difficult thing to do, especially when they were trying to stop Asia from being ritualistically killed for her sacred gear. That's when things went to complete shit. The crazed exorcist Freed didn't like losing, especially if it was to a devil, and so as a last gambit he had pulled out several vials of holy water. He then bathed himself in the stuff as well as coated his blade in it before throwing what was left towards the unsuspecting Kaneko. Fully healthy, a high-ranking pure-blooded devil would be left with severe burns from the blessed liquid. However, Kaneko was not at full strength, nor was she as powerful as a pure-blooded high-ranking devil, and even worse, she was about to take the brunt of the acidic liquid. Without even thinking, Rias tossed the kunai she had received from Naruto with all her strength and desperately called out, "Naruto!" All eyes were drawn to the speeding black knife as it neared the floor at Kaneko's feet, while the holy water was also hurtling towards the stunned Nico. To everyone's shock, a crimson flash appeared in front of the frozen Nico, who was then wrapped in the cloak of the figure that appeared from the flash. The vial smashed against back of the cloak, serving to only soak the piece of clothing. "You okay, Kaneko-chan?" rang the voice throughout the church. The young senjutsu user turned a wide-eyed gaze at the person who had engulfed her in his cloak, ultimately saving her life. "Naruto-senpai?" came her shaky voice. The figure then rose to his full height and let down his now wet cloak before grinning his signature foxy grin. "Well, I'm certainly not OL Saint Nick, or anything." Kaneko then wrapped her arms around the chuckling Naruto's abdomen. "Rias-chan, call everybody back. I'll take it from here." Rias only nodded her head before Kiba, Akino, and a hesitant Issei sped back towards their king near the entrance of the church. "I'm gonna need you to go with them, okay, Kaneko-chan?" Kaneko wiped her eyes of the few tears that had escaped her eyes before nodding and rushing to join the rest of the peerage. The sound of flesh hitting flesh then echoed throughout the church. Freed, with a crazed but pissed glint in his eyes, had a fist caught in Naruto's hand. "How the hell are you not dead yet? I'm covered in holy water. Your heathen ass should be burning right now." "Me a heathen? Sounds funny coming from an excommunicated exorcist, don't you think? Now, normally I'm not one for unnecessary violence, but you made two mistakes. You tried to kill my cute student, and you also harmed the cute nun over there. Sorry, buddy, but I don't let people like you get 3 strikes. The next sound that reverberated through the church was that of bone being broken. Freed crumpled onto the white marble floor of the church in a fleshy mass of pain, only his open mouth and wide eyes expressing the amount of pain he was in. In the blink of an eye, Naruto had crushed the bones in his hand while also delivering a swift kick to his leg at the knee, snapping the joints, tendons, and other assorted body parts located there in two. That's when Rias and the others noticed his eyes. The normally azure orbs that carried warmth and kindness in them were now 2 chips of ice colder than the tundra of Antarctica. This wasn't Sage Naruto. This wasn't prankster Naruto. No, this was the Naruto that had led the Shinobi Alliance against the megalomaniac Tobi. This was the Naruto that had housed the Kyuubi in his body for 17 years of his life and had paid the price for it. Standing before them was the hero of the 4th Shinobi World War. Without even turning his gaze from the other priests and fallen that were now staring at him, Naruto picked up the fallen form of Freed before tossing him into the air like one would a pebble. Before anyone could anything, Naruto had flashed through a series of hand seals and was now cupping his mouth. Katon, Karyu Enden, Fire Style, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. The stream of flames formed the massive head of a roaring dragon whose heat was easily felt by all in the church, causing those closer to the source of the flames to begin to sweat. The dragon then swallowed the form of Freed Selzen, bathing the psychopath in flames. In some odd way, it was almost as if the exorcist was being baptized one last time before going on to be given his final judgment. When all was said and done, not even ashes remained to be seen. All present could only gape in shock. Rias nor her peerage had seen this side of Naruto, nor had they seen any of his abilities outside of the Hiraishin, his physical strength, and his skill with a blade, and none of that had been seen in actual combat. Sure, they knew he was powerful, but what they had just seen was a confirmation of that power. The fallen and the rest of the rogue church members were sweating in fear. This guy had appeared out of thin air and in the span of a minute had dispatched one of their stronger numbers by breathing fire like it was a normal occurrence. The fact that he had done so with a straight face and not once looked like it required any kind of effort on his part was what was even more frightening, even for the fallen. The next words to come out of Naruto's mouth sent everyone there reeling in shock. By order of both the Governor General of the Grigori, Azazel, and Gabriel of the Seraphs, you are all to be disposed of and Asia Argento is to be freed. Edit. I was originally gonna cut it here, but because of how long it took for me to get this out, I figured that as a consolation I would include some of what I had for the chapter after this. So keep going. For a few moments no one said a word or moved a muscle, too shocked to do much else except breathe. How could one not be surprised by what the red-haired sage had just said? He had openly claimed, in so many words, that he was acting on orders received from 2 of the most powerful angels ever, fallen and otherwise, to destroy this small enclave of fallen and rescue the young nun. Finally the silence was broken by the fallen garb in a trench coat and fedora. The man began to laugh out loud as if he had just been told the funniest joke he had ever heard. Naruto was unfazed by this. He had been subject to worse at the hands of the villagers and sometimes his own comrades, so some no-name fallen whose power was equal to that of one of his fingers wouldn't faze him. However, what came out of the laughing fallen's mouth was not what everyone expected. Finally! Someone to give me a challenge! A true warrior! I can see it in your eyes, boy. You have blood on your hands. You've watched as the life drained from the eyes of your enemies. Perfect! Naruto merely narrowed his eyes as he realized just what was going on. This man didn't want Asia or anything grandiose. He was the type of being who reveled in the feeling of battle, the feeling of your life hanging on the line, the adrenaline pumping through your extremities as you fought for your life. And Naruto would lying if he said he didn't sympathize with the man on some level. Maybe it was because he had been exposed to Kurama's chakra in the womb, and then had it coursing through his body for his entire childhood, and well into his teen years. Maybe it was because the Uzumaki were infamous for their tenacity in battle. When you can live through wounds that would down lesser men, then you tended to throw caution to the wind. Maybe it had to do with him suppressing his darker emotions for the vast majority of his life. Naruto didn't know, nor did he really care, because when it was all said and done he was the same way. He loved the feeling of a good fight. He loved hearing the blood pounding in his ears. He relished in the feeling of overcoming his opponent. But this fallen angel wouldn't give that to him. He had faced down the demon Morio when he was still some snot-nosed brat. He dominated pain, albeit with some help, a man with the power to crush the entirety of Konoha with a single phrase. He fought the megalomaniac Obito, a nin who had bested his own father, and was said to be nearing the level of Madara Uchiha himself. Hell, he had stared down, and went toe-to-toe with Kyuubi in her full Bijou form for the right to use her power. This fallen from grace angel was nowhere near strong enough to compare to him. And he was going to show him that. As true warriors, I believe it fitting that we share our names so that we may recall this glorious moment. I am Danasik, the fallen said with a flourish, taking off his cloak and hat. Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto, was Naruto's clipped reply. Danasik called a light spear into each of his hands. Then let us begin, Uzumaki Naruto. The black-winged angel tore off in a burst of speed, a crazed grin on his face. Rainier, who was watching from afar, had a brief moment of déjà vu as Danasik sped towards Naruto, the sage not moving a muscle. Right as Danasik had extended an arm to pierce through Naruto with one of his light spears, the Uzumaki dropped into a crouch, and using the leg muscles he had trained since he was a child exploded upwards, his fist slamming harshly into Danasik's abdomen. The laws of motion took over and the fallen angel was sent at breakneck speeds into the roof of the church. It was then gravity's turn and the still out of wind Danasik plummeted back towards the cold marble of the floor, the sound of bones cracking echoing through the church yet again. Danasik once more surprised everyone when he began to shakily make his way back to his feet, a mad chuckle issuing from his lips. Yes. This is it. This is the kind of battle I was looking for. If it means throwing the three factions back into war for this, then I'd gladly do it. Naruto's eyes narrowed and his fists clenched as he turned an angry gaze at the barely standing fallen. You're willing to put thousands of lives on the line needlessly to satisfy your own bloodlust? In response, Danasik laughed. Of course. This is what it's all about. Those unfit to do battle like this do not need to live. That human Darwin had it right. Survival of the fittest. The next instant Danasik had a length of glowing blue chain wrapped around his neck, lifting him off the ground and stopping the flow of oxygen into his body. Angry azure chips of ice stared him down. Everyone followed the chain and were surprised to see that it was coming directly out of Naruto's back like it had always been there. People like you disgust me. It is not the job of the strong to pass judgment on the weak. No, it is the job of the strong to ensure that there is peace and fairness, to help the world flourish. Danasik's own eyes defiantly glared right back before he managed to choke out, "You are no warrior. Just some tree hugger." Naruto grinned right back, funny. I hail from the village hidden in the leaves and I'm a sage, so you're right, I am a tree hugger. The next instant his eyes had returned to the hardy glint of steel they had been before. Before anyone could blink they saw yet another chain burst from Naruto's back before it sped straight for Dohansik, piercing the disgraced angel through the heart in one clean shot. And I never claimed to be a warrior. I'm a shinobi. I abide by my own set of morals. Both chains receded back into Naruto's back, leaving the corpse of Dohansik to fall lifelessly to the floor, staining the white marble floor around it with the red liquid of life. Without even turning to face the group of rogue priests, Naruto spoke in a low voice seeped with danger, you have 1 minute. If you are not out of this church in 1 minute, your life is forfeit. As soon as the last word left Naruto's mouth, the supposed men of faith began scrambling towards the nearest exits, pushing and shoving to escape the wrath of the sage. Ano, why did you let them leave like that, Naruto-kun? Surely you know they'll just try something like this again, right? Akino managed to get out. I may have let them go, but that doesn't mean the angels would let such men roam the earth so freely. By now they're probably either dead or in the custody of the angels. To everyone's surprise, Naruto's personality took a total 180 as soon as he looked towards the tied-up Asia. The once hardened eyes had returned to their normally warm sapphires, and a small smile was now in the place of the previously stern expression. Now let's get you taken care of, alright, Asia-chan? Asia was too shocked to say anything and just shyly nodded her head. Ignoring the presence of the other 3 fallen angels, Naruto made his way to the pulpit where Asia was chained, nothing hiding her young body from sight. Now was not the time for any inappropriate thoughts though, so Naruto immediately set to work breaking the chains as if they were made out of wet paper. When Asia was finally free from her bonds, he took off his sage cloak and draped it over her shoulders, then, using his high-taid as a belt, wrapped it close to cover the girl. You okay to walk, Asia-chan? Naruto asked in a warm tone that would soothe even the most angry of beasts. Asia demurely nodded her head, why yes. Thank you? Hey now, none of that. An innocent girl like you didn't deserve any of this, Naruto said with that same warm tone. Truth be told, a certain Nico was finding it hard to not feel any sort of jealousy at the way her Senjutsu-sensei was treating the nun. Naruto-sama? Rias and her peerage turned wide eyes towards the 3 female fallen angels who were now bowing towards the sage. It had been the brunette in the leather jacket that had spoken Naruto's name. Yes, Calawarner? Naruto asked as he turned and finally took notice of their presence. We would like to apologize for our part in what has happened to the nun, the now identified Calawarner said in the same subdued voice. Don't apologize to me. You should be apologizing to Asia-chan instead. Everybody noticed how all 3 instantly went rigid for just a brief moment before they turned and inclined their heads towards Asia. We apologize for what we did to you, especially Middle, Calawarner said, getting in a jab at her shorter comrade. Hey! Fuck you, Calawarner! An indignant loli yelled back. Naruto just shook his head and chuckled at the now bickering females. Of course, he knew that if he didn't interfere, the 2 would probably keep going for at least another hour, and he would much like to get back to his bed before that. This is probably how Kakashi-sensei felt dealing with me and Sasuke. Alright, that's enough, you 2. You can continue your little spat after we're done here. Almost instantly the 2 went back to bowing, of course, Naruto-sama. It was at this time that Rias and her peerage made their way towards the group, all with wary faces, though none more so than Akino. So what Azazel said was true, huh? Hopefully I can help Akino-chan out. Naruto-kun, what exactly is happening here? Rias finally asked. Don't talk to Naruto-sama like you know him. Middle burst out. Before Rias could say anything in return, Naruto spoke out, Middle, it's fine. She's a friend. Middle only huffed and began to grumble about disrespectful bimbos. Naruto could only sweat drop at the fallen angel's attitude, Ryughite. Anyways, long story short, while I was out and about, I happened to bump into Azazel. Right as the name left his mouth, Akino tensed, an action Naruto easily caught. So, we chatted for a bit before he told me how some faction of his comrades had split, and were operating outside of his orders. When he told me that they were working from here, I volunteered to handle it when I came back. Evidently that needed to happen sooner than I would have liked. What about Gabriel? How did you meet her, and why did she want you to act on her part? Rias asked, even more questions racing through her head. Well, that one's a pretty long story, but the gist of it is she actually sought me out after I met Azazel. When she heard about what Azazel had asked me to do, she wanted me to help her out by rounding up the rogue priests. So what was it exactly that you were doing that had you meeting the leader of the Grigori and one of heaven's strongest seraphs? Rias pressed on. Naruto sighed, knowing that this was only the tip of the iceberg as far as Rias and her questions went. Looking for some answers to some questions I had, and no, not all of them were answered, but I learned some rather interesting stuff while I was away. Wait, what about those fallen? I thought you said they were sentenced to death by that Azazel guy. An irritated Issei questioned. As far as he was concerned, the 3 females should have suffered the same fate that Donut guy had for what they had done to Asia. Donut Boy and whoever the hell was ringleader for this operation were indeed sentenced to death, but Rainer, Calawarner, and middle were all kind of sleeper agents for Azazel, Naruto explained. But wasn't she the one to have originally killed Issei? Did Azazel order that as well? Kiba asked. No. She was out of line with that one and Azazel has already decided her punishment for that, Naruto replied quickly. He could tell several members of the current group were getting rather antsy being so close to each other, and he wanted to avoid having to break up a fight or deal with anything too serious for the remainder of the day. All he wanted out of life right now was to eat a nice bowl of ramen 5 and to lay down in bed and catch up on some much-needed sleep. Just because he had the stamina to put most wolves to shame, didn't mean he couldn't get tired or enjoy sleeping in a bed like everybody else. He wasn't the only one though. Rias hit it well, but he could see that the day's events were finally taking their toll on her, and the silent look of sleep she was sending his way wasn't very subtle, not that he was complaining. Akino just looked like she wanted to be anywhere other than near the fallen. Kaneko looked almost entirely drained, she was already leaning against his arm to avoid falling to the floor and curling into a ball to sleep. Kiba looked much the same, his eyes drooping closed every so often and his head bobbing up and down. Issei wasn't much better, his sacred gear having receded back to wherever it was stored and taking with it the power boost, leaving a very exhausted fledgling devil. That piqued Naruto's interest. It seemed that the sacred gear itself, one of the Longinus if what he heard was right, held all of the power and acted like Kyuubi had for him, granting Issei a huge but temporary power boost. Once the power was no longer needed, it went back to sleep and left Issei feeling drained because the energy was not his own, meaning his body couldn't totally handle the strain the gear put on it, even as a reincarnated devil. Interesting. Does that mean that if he pushes it too far too soon that he'll lose control of it? And if so, then who or what would be controlling his body? Despite his curiosity, Naruto was much too tired to put much thought into, and instead filed it away in the investigate when not tired portion of his brain. Alright, I think we've all had enough excitement for one day. Naruto then turned his gaze to the 3 fallen angels. You 3 are to report back to Azazel, and the rest of you let's get some damn shut-eye, any? Everyone was more than happy to agree to that. Amuzumaki-san? Where would I be staying? The still shy Asia asked. Not missing a beat, Naruto turned to her. My house, of course. There's more than enough room for you. And call me Naruto, or Naruto-Nizan. Asia's face burst into a full-on blush at the fact that Naruto hadn't even given it a thought to offering her a place to stay. Thank you again, Naruto. With the 3 fallen angels gone, the rest of the group made to leave the church, intent on getting some well-deserved rest. Staying in the church with the holy power draining them for so long had taken quite the toll on all of them. So with an already asleep Kaneko on his back, Naruto led the group out into the cool night air. I was wondering when you would be done in there, Naruto, came a sultry voice not too far from them. All eyes present turned to see a female figure standing underneath the shade of the trees, just out of the moonlight. Naruto was unperturbed by this and spoke back calmly, Sorry about that, Akemi-chan. Just had some loose ends to tie up. The obviously female figure that walked from out underneath the shade of the trees could only be described as a goddess-given physical form. Smooth, beautifully tanned skin only a shade or so lighter than Naruto's own complexion almost glowed in the moonlight of the cloudless night. A slit up the left side of a crimson-colored cheongsam showed a fair amount of her lithe legs when she moved, with a pair of black shinobi sandals covering her feet. The Chinese dress also left enough of her sizable bust visible as to tantalize those who looked at her. Her hair, which looked like a living fire due to the different shades of reds and oranges that made it up, fell flat and smooth to just below her shoulders with bangs curved to the left, giving her a seductive come-hither look. Lightly lined deep carmine eyes with long, dark lashes finished the look off. Her plump lips were painted a fiery red. She lacked the massive bust that Rias and Akino possessed, her curves instead fitting perfectly on her lithe figure, and showing that despite her beauty she was extremely fit. A seductive smirk on her face tied it all together. Issei was openly drooling like a fountain at the sight of the woman, while even Kiba was blushing up a storm and doing his best to look anywhere except where the woman stood. Asia was left in awe and only stared at her. Kaneko looked at the woman then back to her body before pouting. This isn't even fair anymore. Even Rias had to admit that the woman was gorgeous, though her pride wouldn't let her say so aloud. What gained everyone's attention was when the woman sauntered up to Naruto, not once tearing her predatory gaze away from him, and wrapped her arms around his neck. Without either party batting an eye, the woman nuzzled her head into his chest while almost purring. I missed my Naruto. You just up and disappeared on me. Jaws dropped at that statement. Wait. You're Naruto-kun! A gaping Issei shouted. The woman didn't even bother to spare the boy a glance. Come on, let's go, Naruto-kun. I'm feeling tired and I know you are too. Our bed awaits. Rias was the next one to react to your bed. The woman finally turned a bored side glance towards the rest of the group, not letting go of her hold on Naruto. I'm sorry, who are you? Tiffed at the casual dismissal she was given, Rias used every ounce of royalty she had and crossed her arms on her breasts, assuming her most dignified stance, before replying, I am Rias Gremory, heiress apparent of the Gremory clan. Good for you, now be a good little girl and stop interrupting my Naruto time. Rias clenched her fist, and a tick mark began to form on her head out of frustration. Naruto knew if he let this go on any longer he would not be getting nearly as much sleep as he wanted. Akemi-chan, be nice. Akemi pouted at Naruto, fine. Now come on. If anyone wants to crash at my place you're more than welcome to, Naruto said before yawning loudly. Kiba shook his head, thanks but no thanks. I'm okay to make it back to my home. Ja-eni Minasan. Issei did the same, yeah, my parents are probably wondering where the heck I'm at so I should get going too. Ja-eni. Naruto shrugged at the two, fair enough. What about you, Akino-chan? Era, already inviting me to your home, Uzumaki-kun? How daring of you! What would people think if they knew? Akino said dramatically. Naruto was unfazed by this due to the sleepiness clouding his mind and having a certain snake mistress as a friend. Funny, Akino. Real funny. Now come on, we're going there via Haration transports. Yofufu, so bold, Uzumaki-kun. Naruto wasn't even going to try and respond to that one, so with all of the girls holding on to Naruto in some fashion, Rias and Akemi glaring at each other heatedly, they were gone in a flash of crimson. When they were gone, a small spot in the air above the church shimmered before revealing a shadowed figure standing on the roof. TCH, bastard ruined my plans to get that sacred gear. And now the Grigori and Seraphs are on to me. Just great. The next morning finds the sage on the receiving end of two angry gazes, though said anger had nothing to do with him directly. The night before, Rias and Akemi had begun to bicker over who would be sleeping with Naruto in his bed. Naruto at that point had just wanted to sleep, and took advantage of the fact that he had several other rooms available to him. However, Kaneko had long since fallen asleep leaning against him, and was tightly clutching him, so he had gone to sleep with her wrapped around his arm. Asia had gone to the room adjacent to his with Akino, taking the one to the left of his. Naruto had no idea where or even if Akemi and Rias had fallen asleep last night. What he did know was that the two were at this moment wide awake and demanding answers from him, and with it being a Saturday, Rias didn't have to go to school and Akemi could find him anywhere he went, so running was out of the question. Today's gonna be a long day, I can already tell. A certain lowly dragon god chose that exact moment to walk into the kitchen as well. I require your services, Uzumaki. A really long day. The sound of wood hitting wood reverberated throughout the Ko Academy dojo as a certain Gremory knight traded blows with a certain red-headed sage. On the sidelines were the members of the Kendo Club, who sat in awe at the masterful skill both teens displayed. What was even more shocking to the girls was the calmness the two exuded, making the whole exchange seem as if the two were just having a polite conversation and not trying to strike each other. The other members of Rias' peerage were also in attendance, and were just as surprised at the prowess their comrades had when it came to the art of the blade. Rias of course knew Kiba was talented with the sword, knowing of his harsh past with the Holy Sword experiment. The experiment may have failed at its primary goal, but Kiba was left with the skill of a master swordsman, which made him a perfect knight. What she noticed, and many others failed to, was that Naruto was outclassing Kiba completely. She had realized that right from the start it was Naruto who was in control of the flow of the battle, and in any kind of battle, sword play or not, that was something you didn't want to give to your enemy. Rias was even more intrigued when she realized the ease with which Naruto was dictating the course of the battle. He looked perfectly calm and happy, even excited, the entire time, and hadn't even started to breathe heavily, let alone put in any real effort. Had it not been for the huge grin on his face, and the occasional chuckle, he could have been sleepwalking for all it mattered. Kiba, on the other hand, was dripping with sweat, and it was clear from the sloppiness of his normally precise technique just how much the fatigue was beginning to affect him. Nonetheless, he had a grin on his face, enjoying the chance to be pushed to his limits without having to have his life on the line. Uzumaki-kun is extremely talented with a blade, Abucho, Akino commented from her seated position next to her crimson-haired king. Without even looking away from the fast-paced duel, Rias replied, indeed he is, Akino. Makes one wonder how he got so good at such a young age. After all, There are devils who have trained for decades but are only half as skilled as Uzumaki-kun. Rias' eyes narrowed. Yes, but keep in mind Naruto-kun was raised to be a weapon for his village. Next to Rias, Kaneko stopped eating halfway through her sweet bread, her fists clenching. Akino was the same, her head turning down as she also recalled what Naruto had revealed to them the morning prior. Flashback. So who is she, Naruto? An angry Rias asked. Naruto sighed as he ran his hand through his hair. Rias was standing before him, arms crossed and a fire burning in her eyes, with the other members of her peerage behind her. Ophis was off to the side leaning on a wall, but he could see that she was just as interested in the answer to that question. The amount of power Ophis could feel from this Akemi person was astounding, and in many ways bore heavy similarities to Naruto himself. She wasn't the only one, though. Thanks to being a little more accustomed to using nature energy, Kaneko's sensory abilities had been boosted quite a bit, and using said abilities she could see that this Akemi person was somehow heavily linked to her Senjutsu sensei. Everyone present could feel it actually, but no one could tell exactly what it was. Rias, however, felt it differently. In a way, Akemi and Naruto's connection felt somewhat similar to the connection she had as king to the rest of her peerage, and that kind of bond was bordering on the soul level. Naruto nervously scratched the back of his head and chuckled. The short answer? She's my best friend and the one person who knows me better than anyone else probably ever could. Maybe even better than I know myself. And the long answer? Rias questioned. Well, the long answer is a little more complicated, Naruto answered. Regardless, Rias just kept her gaze on him, silently telling him that she was willing to listen regardless of how complicated it was. After a moment, he sighed and began to explain. And back to the future. Present? Whatever. That morning Naruto had told them the reason his parents had died the night he was born, and he was treated like trash for the first 12 years of his life. They had all been surprised that Naruto had stuck around as long as he had. Nonetheless, everyone present had gained a dislike towards anything having to do with Konoha. It struck a chord in Rias though. For 12 years Naruto was not Naruto to the villagers, but instead was the bijou he held at bay. Even when he saved them countless times, he still wasn't Naruto to them. He was the son of one of their greatest heroes. Rias could sympathize with Naruto on that. Being the little sister to one of the new Mao, the one generally considered to be the most powerful, no less, an heiress to one of the 72 pillars meant she was seen less as an actual individual and more like a pawn for their plans. Even her own family saw her as such, engaging her to that fool riser despite all of her protests. She had to make decisions that kept the name of her clan in mind, whether she wanted to or not. Naruto could have turned out the same way, but one of the things Rias admired about her fellow redhead was that, despite having innumerable people expecting various things of him, he always found a way to stick to his own personal set of morals and never compromise who he was. All were very impressed when, only a few moments later, Naruto was able to pin Kiba's sword under his foot whilst pointing his own blade at the Bishounin's neck. I'd say that about wraps up our little spar, any? Naruto asked, his face fixed in his infamous foxy grin. Kiba only smiled back and nodded, hi. The two stood tall and shook hands before heading towards their friends. Ano, here you go, Naruto, Asia said as she smiled and handed Naruto a bottle of water. Thanks, Asia-chan, Naruto said, giving the nun a grateful smile. Naruto of course took notice of Rias' faraway look, something she wasn't exactly known for. Actually, she had been distracted for the past few days. She had also seemed a little on edge and would occasionally glance at the calendar, which meant something was going to happen soon. Aside from all that, she had also begun to spend some time going elsewhere, and it had to do with that last person who was connected to her. She's feeling nervous and she's visiting whoever that last member of her peerage is rather frequently. But why? Before Naruto could ponder the matter any further, a certain pervert had to run in screaming his head off. What sent everyone into a fit of laughter was what was painted across his white shirt. In bright bold orange lettering across Issei's chest was "The Student Council sucks." Of course, given that the student council members were all very well liked by pretty much the entire student population, Issei soon found himself being hounded by a small crowd of its supporters. Naruto was openly laughing aloud as he saw his little prank come to fruition. Even the spaced-out Rias had begun to giggle, although she attempted to hide it by covering her mouth with her hand. She then turned her head to the one responsible for this. You do know about the student council, right, Naruto-kun? Still chuckling, Naruto turned his head. You mean about them being devils as well? Yeah, I kinda figured. So he can easily sense when there's a devil around. Does that mean he also knows about Liza? Rias thought. With that in mind, Rias gave Naruto a look he was all too familiar with, the dreaded "we need to talk" look. He had been on the receiving end of that look quite often during his teen years, so when Rias directed it at him he had a few flashbacks to the times when Tsunade, Sakura, and even Shizen had used it on him. Rias and even Akino were curious as to why Naruto suddenly shivered and began to sweat, his eyes darting to all the windows and exits like someone had come to murder him, and he had to find the perfect exit to escape through. Akino reached a hand out to the tall redhead and was surprised when Naruto almost jumped out of his skin when she put her hand on his shoulder. "Yofufu, I had no idea I had that kind of effect on you, Uzumaki-kun." Naruto chuckled and began to rub the back of his head. Sorry about that. Force of habit." Rias only raised an eyebrow at that response. "Yes, well, I have something to talk to you about. Well, actually, both you and Ise say so. Meet us in the club room." Mere minutes after Rias and her peerage had left the dojo, Naruto realized exactly what she was asking of him. Damn it, she left me to save the perv and drag his ass back to the clubroom. Well played, Rias, but you are messing with the wrong person, Naruto thought. None of the occult research club members were surprised when Naruto leapt into the room through the open window, Issei being carried over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. What caught Naruto's attention was the additional person in the room, who was occupying the seat next to Kaneko. They looked to be around the same age as his senjutsu student, and she had blonde hair that reminded him of a certain Yamanaka back in Konoha. The only difference was that where Ino's hair was long enough to fall to her shapely rear end, the girl sitting next to Kaneko had hers cut in a short bob. What interested Naruto was the fact that she had the same connection to Rias that her peerage did, which meant that the newcomer was the last member. "I'm gonna take a wild guess and assume that she has something to do with what you wanted to talk about, right?" Naruto asked. Rias only nodded her head. "I figured that since you could differentiate between devils, angels, and humans, I should properly introduce you to my bishop, Eliza Beta Vladi, too, though she prefers Liza." Naruto dropped Issei to the floor without a care, leaving the teen to moan about not getting any respect. Naruto then proceeded to his usual spot, Kaneko getting up to let the redhead sit before happily occupying his lap. The whole sequence happened without anyone batting an eye, though if you looked closely, Rias' hands began to clench tightly. The young platinum blonde devil next to Naruto began to nearly hyperventilate at being so close to Naruto. "Well, I actually figured out she was devil after I realized that she was a part of your peerage." Rias was even more shocked when he told her that bit of info. "You can tell when someone is in a peerage?" "Kind of. I can sense that you are all somehow linked, and so I figured that the link had to do with them being your servants," Naruto said nonchalantly. Rias nodded her head in acceptance. "Though I gotta ask, why are you only now telling not just me, but also Issei about Liza?" Rias sighed at that. "Liza is actually a damper." "Wait, what's a damper?" Naruto interrupted. "A damper is the offspring of a human and vampire." Seeing Naruto understood, Rias continued, "Liza is a damper, but is special because she is also the holder of a sacred gear called Forbidden Baler View, which allows her to freeze those she sees in time." Naruto whistled at that. "That's a really powerful time ability. I know a couple of much stronger and devastating ones, but having that naturally is impressive." Rias raised an eyebrow. "I know that your Hiraishin is a pretty ingenious work of time/space powers, but I thought that was the only one of its kind." Naruto chuckled. "Nope. There's a whole branch of ninjutsu called Jikuken Jutsu. One of my senseis could actually use a technique called Kamui, Authority of the Gods, that allowed him to transfer anything in his eyesight to an entirely different dimension. I once saw him teleport an enemy's arm. The bastard I fought against could do the same to his own body, which made him intangible and invulnerable to almost any physical attacks. Made him ridiculously hard to kill." Rias and the rest of the group were highly interested in the story, as Naruto was still only revealing bits and pieces of his past to them, so any time he talked about himself or his past they listened with rapt attention. "How did you end up killing him?" Kiba asked. "Me and my best friend Sasuke combined our strongest attacks and unleashed the equivalent of a hydrogen bomb on his ass. Took him and a large chunk of our home country out with it too," Naruto said as if he was talking about the weather. Even Kaneko, who had been purring under the magical hands of her teacher, stared at Naruto in awe. For a while, everybody was too shocked to say anything. Eventually Naruto broke the silence. "That was nothing compared to the technique me and Akemi can perform together though. Now that was powerful. Created a massive crater and even shook the continent apart." Again they were left speechless. Naruto had just confessed to acts of destruction on a massive scale with a casual comment, and they had no idea how to react. Where is she?" Rias asked. "Akemi? She took Asia out shopping to get the girl some new clothes and other things she'll need." Rias coughed before nodding. "In any case, back to Liza. The trouble is that she can't control the Baylor view, and so I've kept her sealed at the academy until we could somehow learn how to control it." It was Naruto's turn to raise an eyebrow. "What do you mean by can't control it?" Rias sighed, showing just how tired the topic made her. "Liza becomes much more violent when using the power and takes on an entirely different persona, one that I think is tied into the sacred gear somehow. The more I learn about these sacred gears, the more and more they remind me of the relationship between a Jinchuriki and their bijou. They are essentially this world's bijou, things born of the Shinju's energy, though more watered down, as the Christian god was the one to create them and he himself was only a fraction of the Shinju. The sacred gears seem to be as sentient as the bijou were as well. What about Asia's? Does her twilight healing carry a sentient being in it? Naruto thought. The whole affair unnerved Naruto greatly. The entire situation bore too much of a striking semblance to the bijou and the creation of the Jinchuriki. Some humans were chosen to bear these items, and the items in return gave them abilities that made them better in some way than the average human. The wielders of these items also had no choice in the matter, being born with them. Then there were people out in the world who saw the holders of said items as nothing more than tools or sources of power. On top of that, there were also people out there who were willing to kill to get their hands on one of the items. Then there were more still who were trying to create artificial versions of the items. And in all this there were the holders of the items, people who, most of the time, just wanted to live a simple normal life. That dream would never become a reality though. When Naruto saw Asia on the pedestal about to have her sacred gear extracted, he had gotten flashbacks to seeing Gaara after having Shikaku extracted, dead. It had made him angry beyond words. Honestly, the more I think about it, the fewer differences I see. The sacred gears really are this world's version of the bijou. The sacred gear holders are viewed almost exactly like we Jinchuriki were, treated differently for something that was thrust on us, never looked at as just people. To nearly everyone, what we contained was more important than us as people, and it's happening all over again. Everyone in the room could feel it. The oppressive aura that suddenly covered the room sent a shiver of fear down their spines and suffocated them. It was a feeling they hadn't felt since the whole church incident, and that had been a second-hand dosage. What they were feeling right now was close to being directly aimed at them. Kaneko was the one to break the spell, her hand softly caressing Naruto's cheek. When Naruto looked up, not even realizing he had begun to clench his fists or even that he had looked down in the first place, he was greeted with the worried eyes of Kaneko, Rias, Akino, and Kiba. Liza and Issei were huddled together in a corner due to fear of Naruto. Naruto chuckled to break the tension in the room. "Sorry about that. Just got lost in my thoughts for a minute." No one dared to ask what the crimson-haired Uzumaki was thinking of that had gotten him mad enough to create such an oppressive aura. "At any rate, is there any way possible you could help her with controlling her powers like you're doing with Kaneko?" Rias asked, an imploring tone in her voice. She really does care for her peerage members like family members. Naruto sighed. "I can help Kaneko, because I am a master at Senjutsu. While I may be pretty good at seals and understanding Jikuken Jutsu, I'm nowhere near being a master at it." Naruto immediately saw the look of disappointment cross Ria's face, a look being mirrored by Liza. Naruto hated to see that look, especially when he was the cause of it, and so he continued, "But that doesn't mean I can help her control it. It may be a time/space ability, but it's an ability, a power, and all powers can be mastered through good old-fashioned hard work. Besides, if anything goes wrong, I can be there to contain it or help her along with it." A shining look of hope instantly appeared on the once depressed Damper's face. Rias gave Naruto a grateful smile, happy that he could help someone close to her where she couldn't, yet again. She better not try to steal Naruto-senpai, were a certain Nico's thoughts. Sure, she was happy for her fellow peerage member, but she'd be damned if the Damper tried to muscle in on her time with her favorite person. It was already hard enough to get time alone with him with Rias and Akemi around, and then there was Asia. Now Liza? Yeah, Kaneko wasn't exactly a happy camper. After a rather long day of first training Kaneko, then dealing with the ever-arguing duo of Akemi and Rias, introducing himself properly to the Damper Liza and starting her training by getting to know each other a bit more, and helping Asia get situated with all that Akemi had bought for the girl, using his money he might add, Naruto was pretty tired. Akemi had gone off to explore this world some more, whatever she meant by that, which left Naruto the rare joy of sleeping alone in his own bed. Don't get him wrong, he loved having another body to warm the bed with him, but there were some times that he liked to be alone. That thought process was thrown out the window when a glowing red circle of runes appeared at the foot of his bed, signaling the arrival of a certain gremry. However, Naruto was thoroughly surprised when a very nervous and distracted-looking Rias stepped out of said set of runes. He was used to the Rias who was witty, firm in her beliefs, and not afraid to stand up for herself. This side of Rias was something that kind of unnerved Naruto. "Naruto-kun, you said you'd help me with anything if I asked you, right?" Rias asked, not once looking at the sage. The Uzumaki got up from his bed, uncaring of his shirtless appearance. "Of course, Rias-chan. What is it you need?" Rias seemed to grow even more nervous. "If that was possible, my family made a marriage contract for me when I was younger. I don't want it, I hate it. I hate that they want to marry me off for political reasons, and I despise the person they want to marry me to." Rias then rushed to Naruto, burying her face into his chest. "Please, you have to help me. Help me get out of it." Naruto just wrapped his arms around Rias' smaller frame and nuzzled his head into the top of hers. "I'll help you any way I can, Rias. We'll figure this out together." That night Rias slept, cuddled in the arms of Naruto, holding tightly onto him as if she feared he would fade away otherwise. "So do you think there's any other way for us to do this without having to resort to that?" a nervous Rias asked. She and Naruto had been looking over every devil law that had anything at all to do with marriage. While they had found a plethora of fun facts about said topic, there was little else, and even less that could help them solve Rias's problem. The only concrete way they had found to make the contract null and void was if Rias willingly had sex with another man and became pregnant with his child. The prospect of doing so was something both Rias and Naruto had mixed feelings about. Rias was more than willing to do it if it meant she could get out of the contract. The fact that the man who would father the child and whom she would be giving her virginity to was Naruto made the choice all the more appealing. She may not know absolutely everything about Naruto, but she did know enough about the sage to be sure that if she had to choose anyone to have a child with, it was Naruto. The thought had entered her mind before, but she had believed that it would be after they had fallen in love with each other and were married and ready to settle down. Not to get her out of a marriage contract she was forced into. Naruto was having similar thoughts. Rias was pretty much immortal and would remain young for hundreds or even thousands of years to come. The fact that she could also give him the one thing he had always wanted, a family, was all the more tantalizing. He would be lying if he said that he didn't find Rias extremely attractive as well as interesting. Of course she was drop-dead gorgeous, but she was also intelligent, strong-willed, not afraid to put his ass in line, and kind. The fact that she had the crimson hair he so loved was just icing on the cake. He of course wanted to take the time to get to know her better, and maybe even fall for her. The sage also wanted to make sure that she knew what she was getting into with him. She may know about his being a former Jinchuriki and a sage, but there was a lot he still hadn't told her, a lot that could make or break a relationship. On top of that was his own paranoia over the whole Scarred Earth issue. Naruto as of yet hadn't figured out just what that mysterious dark energy was, or why he felt portions of what seemed to be the Christian god's energy with it. A world where a beast birthed by the Shinju was waking up was not exactly the greatest of environments to raise a child in. He knew that from first-hand experience, after all. However, as the two of them kept looking over the various laws, it began to seem more and more likely that they'd have to take that option. Naruto sighed as he closed the book in his hands. "We have 3 options available to us." Rias perked up upon hearing that Naruto had found possibly another way. "The obvious route we both know about is a for sure way. However, there is another method that could possibly work. It all depends on your family going along with it, though." "What is it?" "Somewhat of a higher standing or able to give your family more would have to challenge the contract by offering them something of equal or greater value. The downside is that even though you would be free of the current contract, you would be forced into another with someone else," Naruto finished. Rias sat on the floor with Naruto and tiredly let her head drop against his shoulder. Any other time Naruto may have said something about it, but at that point he was too exhausted to care, so he just wrapped his arm around the equally drained Rias and began to comb through her long tresses with his fingers. "I don't think that's even plausible considering that the Phoenix clan is one of the strongest and wealthiest families of the 72 pillars, and my clan is the only real competition to that claim," Rias spoke quietly. The whole affair had drained her, not physically but mentally and emotionally. For the past few days her mind had been cluttered with thoughts of how to get out of the contract, and fear over what would happen if she couldn't. The last option is even less likely to work. You would have to challenge your fiancé to a rating game, and no offense, your peerage is nowhere near strong enough to do so. The only ones who could even pose a threat are yourself, Akino, Kiba, and Kaneko. Both Liza and Issei are way too inexperienced with their individual sacred gears to do much of anything, no matter how powerful those gifts are. Not to mention the difference in numbers. "Then that leaves only one option," Rias said, blushing and looking at her hands. Suddenly Naruto grinned his signature foxy grin, something everyone who were even slightly familiar with him knew meant that he had just come up with some scheme. That or he had thought of a prank to pull. Either way, it wasn't a good sign for whoever his victim was. There's one more option, Rias-chan. Rias snapped her head up, hope shining in her eyes. Naruto turned his own eyes to Rias, sapphire staring into aqua. But you would have to okay it first. Rias only nodded. Well, what is it, Naruto-kun? Our second option. There may not be a devil who could contest with whatever the Phoenix clan is offering your family, but who said it had to be a devil? Naruto asked, his grin threatening to split his face. Rias instantly caught on to what Naruto was saying, and she had to admit that it was ingenious. Riser Phoenix was strong, no doubt about that, but he was nowhere even close to being able to compete with Naruto. While she still didn't know the height of the sage's power, from the brief glimpses she had seen she could safely say that Naruto would have little trouble dealing with Riser, even with the unique immortality the Phoenix clan was known for. On top of that, from what Naruto had told her, both of his parents were among the strongest people from their dimension, and his mother's clan was infamous for its unique traits that had been passed to Naruto himself. The Gremory/Bale clan's powers of destruction combined with the Fuinjutsu and longevity of the Uzumaki clan would be something to be feared. Besides all that was the fact that Naruto had hinted that his own healing ability was better than the Phoenix clan's, a claim she couldn't help but believe, regardless of her not having seen it herself. That was something she had found out about Naruto. He just had this presence and conviction to his words that made you want to put all your faith in him. From the brief stories he and Akemi had shared, that faith was never misplaced. However, that meant that instead of being betrothed to said Phoenix, she would instead have to marry her fellow redhead. When that thought registered, she didn't even have to think about what her response would be. Let's do it, Rias said resolutely. Naruto being Naruto had to ask again though, are you sure you want to go through with this, Rias-chan? If your family agrees, you'd be engaging yourself to. Before he could finish the sentence, Rias did something that stunned Naruto into silence. She kissed him. The kiss was quick, nothing but a simple peck on the lips, but both had felt something in that brief contact that could not be translated into words. It had sent tingles, pleasant ones, throughout their bodies and left them craving for more. When Rias removed her lips, she didn't pull away completely, leaving their foreheads to touch and their breath to mingle in the small space between their mouths. Naruto-kun, if I had to choose anyone to be engaged with, it would be you. I may not know everything there is to know about you, but one thing I know for a fact is that you would never intentionally hurt me. I know that you would sooner storm the gates of heaven and hell before you let anybody cause me or anyone close to you harm. And ultimately I know that you are a great man, someone I would be proud to someday call my husband. Someone I wouldn't mind spending the next few centuries with. Instead of his usual mischievous grin, Naruto's face instead held a small smile. In that smile, however, was a level of happiness that Naruto had felt only a few times in his life. A smile so very few had ever seen, and would proudly say that they had been given the rare chance to see a true Naruto smile, not out of excitement but out of true happiness. I've never been good with words, I'm more of a man of action, always have been and I probably always will be. This is no different, Naruto spoke softly before claiming Rias' lips with his own. This kiss started off innocently enough as an expression of not love, but something that could become love. However, soon enough, when the two couldn't get enough of the feeling the kiss gave them, it became a lot less innocent. Rias eventually pushed Naruto to the floor, before she grabbed his coat in her hands, straddled him with her long creamy legs, and hungrily began to kiss the sage. The Uzumaki's hands weren't idle either, busy as they were massaging Rias' curvaceous hips, causing the girl to moan into the kiss slightly. Before anything more could happen, several sounds at that, interrupted the moment. Rias-senpai is being defiled by that damn sage. Era, I didn't think Bucho would be skipping class to do something so naughty with Uzumaki-kun Yufufu. Rias-senpai isn't being fair. What the hell do you think you're doing with My Naruto-kun? The last three members, Kiba, Asia, and Liza, were looking elsewhere with dark blushes staining their faces. Rias was torn between embarrassment at being caught playing tonsil hockey with the resident sage and anger that they were interrupted. Being a pure-blooded devil meant that she didn't have as many boundaries as most people, so she settled on being angry. Naruto's thoughts were a little different. I wonder if Akemi and Rias don't mind sharing. Wait, damn you, Kakashi-sensei, Iaro Senin. Back in Konoha, a busy Kakashi, read as busy reading Ika, sneezed quite violently. I feel as though a certain student of mine is cursing my name. Could it mean? Immediately Kakashi's mask strained as the silver-haired Kage's face broke into a large grin. Sakura. We are declaring today a holiday. From just outside the door the aforementioned woman's voice came. I told you already that you can't make it Topless Tuesday, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi lamented at that before regaining his previous bravado. We'll talk about that some other time. Today is the day Naruto-kun was welcomed into the ranks of his predecessors, the ranks of the pervert. Almost instantly the door to his office exploded into splinters, an angry busted blonde at the door with murder in her eyes. I swear to God, Kakashi, if you corrupted my little Naruto-kun, I will make sure that you can't give Shizen any more kids. Kakashi was of course cowering in a corner, in the fetal position. It was Jiraiya-sama's fault, I swear. Spare me, O merciful one. Before anyone else could say or do anything, a familiar set of runes bearing the Gremory clan mark appeared on the floor of the clubroom. Seeing the mark, Rias already knew exactly who was coming through and unconsciously gripped Naruto's cloak tighter. I do hope you weren't trying to do what I think you were, Rias-sama, came the monotone voice of the woman walking out of the teleportation circle. Naruto had to hold in a whistle as he beheld the beauty of the woman. Though her monotone voice made him sweat drop, what is with the women here and being impassive? Even Samui-chan showed a little more emotion than Office and this woman. Rias sighed before gracefully rising to her feet and straightening out her clothing, Naruto doing the same. No, I was not. I was just thanking the man who had helped me find an even better way out of my predicament, Graphia. So this woman is the famed Graphia Lucifuge, the supposed unofficial fifth Mao. From what Azazel told me, she's one of the few devils able to give her husband, Rias' elder brother, a good fight, and even competed with one of the current Mao for the title, Naruto thought as he gazed at the silver-haired beauty. Graphia, however, didn't even acknowledge his presence, or any of the others for that matter, instead focusing solely on the heiress of the Gremory family. I do not think your fiancé would appreciate your way of thanking another man. Nonetheless, it is time for you to fulfill said contract, Graphia said, her voice not once wavering in tone. Naruto decided that now was as good a time as any for him to intervene, and he did so by smoothly stepping in front of Rias. He bowed to Graphia, which garnered the slight raising of one of her eyebrows as a reaction. Unfortunately, I must disagree with you, Lucifuge-san. You see, I wish to challenge the current marriage contract between the Gremory and Phoenix clans. And who would you be to declare such a thing? Graphia asked, a hint of doubt entering her voice. Naruto grinned so wide his eyes closed, before replying, no one but a wandering sage. However, I detest when people force others into doing something they would rather not, and Rias is my friend. So I will not just stand aside as she is forcibly wed to a man that she, in every sense of the word, loathes. Naruto knew that people like Graphia would never take him seriously at first. The only thing they respected was power, so he would show her why it had taken the combined might of Iwa, Kumo, and Kiri to destroy Uzushio, and even then they had failed, the Uzumaki clan merely becoming scattered. When Naruto next opened his eyes, he stared straight into Graphia's own silver orbs and began to channel his chakra around him. Everyone in the room instantly felt it, an invisible weight that began to grow heavier with each passing second. Soon the weight was too much, and Issei began to pant and broke out into a sweat.